Hey everyone, Anark here, and this is another Anark live stream. Welcome to the live stream, everybody that's watching on the VOD, and to whoever has shown up this early to the live stream, which is kind of shocking, but I appreciate you being here. I'm going to spread this link around so that people even know the live stream is happening. Didn't really give you all very much notice, but we have begun. All right. Spreading the link around. Let's see here. Boom. Goes there, goes here, goes all kinds of different places. There we go. Got our first few people. How y'all doing? Oh wow, my camera is not focusing correctly. I'm glad I noticed it now. I'm not sure why it's been having trouble today, but it has been. So maybe I need to take it off of autofocus and put it on manual. I think we're just gonna have to live with it, unfortunately. Setting it while the live stream is going would be somewhat difficult. I got new glasses, probably hard to tell, but they're a little bit different. Here they are. Why is it keeps losing focus? That's so annoying. I have no idea what to do to fix it. It's supposed to track my face. Why is it having so much difficulty? Super weird. Also, it's off center. There we go. Seems like it's better. We're doing good. There we go. Greetings from Brazil. Well, good to have you here, Anna Krista. So yeah, opening spiel. I think everybody knows we're on hard economic times, but if you have money to spare, you should go over to my Patreon. Become a patron for any amount. That is what truly keeps this channel going on a regular schedule. Without my patrons, I would have to, pull back on making content by quite a bit. I mean, at the moment, my Patreon has been stable, but there has been a lot of turnover. So if you want to help, just know that this is the time to do it. I would appreciate you enormously. And, you've probably seen a lot of YouTubers making videos about how it is kind of a difficult time right now to get by. So yeah, no, I appreciate everybody who is a patron. That is a large portion of my income. So, if you're already a patron, I appreciate you. And if you're considering becoming one, please take the leap and, become a patron for any amount you can afford. Yeah, sorry. But there's that. Also, if you want to become a subscriber to Means TV, just use my affiliate code, which is Anark, A-N-A-R-K, and I'll get a small cut of that recurring subscription fee that you're paying. So that's also a way to support a workers' cooperative. It is a workers' cooperative. We function completely democratically. So yeah. Is that a screaming cat on my arm? Yeah, this is the Sabo cat. Oh god, did my camera stop working? Okay, it's already fixed. I fixed it in record time. Yeah, it was frozen. I fixed it. It's been doing weird stuff all day today. I have no idea what's wrong with it, but it's not being very consistent. But yeah, no, this is Sabo cat. I got this when I considered myself an anarcho-syndicalist. It's still a good symbol, though. It's very much in-group signaling. If somebody has it, you know that they're either an anarcho-syndicalist or they're associated with the IWW. It did it again. What is it doing right now? Give me a sec. Excuse me. All right. Well, I don't know if that'll help, but here's to hoping. There we go. My voice is lower by an octave, probably because I haven't talked since I woke up today. My voice can vary quite a bit, which actually is one of the reasons why recording voiceover is so hard, is because I'll record voiceover one day and my voice will be at a higher octave, and then I'll record it the next day and it sounds like this. So it's like, it just sounds like too different to use in the same video. Somebody said, do you recommend reading theory before you read history or reading both at the same time? I think you should just like take up whichever one interests you more first. But personally, I think it's more important to read theory. But yeah, you should absolutely read theory and history. And, you know, you could just alternate or just focus on whichever one is your interest at the time. But personally, I think that theory is probably the most important thing to read. History is very contingent. You can learn a lot from it. It's like learning from experiments. But at the same time, it's sometimes very difficult to interpret history without theory. So theory can be kind of, I don't know, what should I put, or what should I say, like, it can be very discouraging. The failures can be very discouraging if you don't know how to contextualize them properly, which theory allows you to contextualize them properly. Yeah, I'm still in the middle of my morning routine right now as this stream starts. How's everybody been doing? How you been getting by? Are you surviving this hell world that we occupy? Damn, it keeps going out of focus. That's so frustrating to me. Stop it. Stop it. There we go. You should read Nationalism and Culture. It is absolutely phenomenal. It is so, so good. I highly recommend everyone read Nationalism and Culture. I think it not only is it extremely informative, but it has some of the most beautiful prose of any piece of theory I've ever read. So it's also beautiful. And I think it's probably appropriate for a lot of us who are trying to understand the context of fascism and authoritarianism and what it looks like living through it and so on. So, yes, I'm from the United States. How do I see anarchism in Europe? There's a lot of anarchism in Europe. It originated in Europe. Yeah, the Eric King interview was really good. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Yeah, don't forget to like the live stream. I'm assuming that makes a difference somehow. Got to talk about the shortcomings of syndicalism as opposed to anarcho-communism. Mostly that syndicalism was too economically reductionist. That's part of the reason why I stopped calling myself an anarcho-syndicalist. I still think that anarcho-syndicalist methods are highly effective, that they work very well, but ultimately my analysis just is more wide-spanning. Whereas the anarcho-syndicalists tend to focus on the formation of unions, I am much more broadly focused in my praxis than that. So don't think it was appropriate to call myself an anarcho-syndicalist with that in mind. I mostly called myself an anarcho-syndicalist because I was most inspired by the CNTFAI during the Spanish Civil War, and that was very, very anarcho-syndicalist. But yeah, that's pretty much all it is for me. Reductionist. It means that your analysis focuses too narrowly on something, or that you try to boil everything down to that aspect. To be an economic reductionist is to think everything is about economics. It all roots to economics somehow. Instead of thinking that economics is just one part of the picture, or even that maybe it's a very important component, but it's not the literal root of all of the problems. That would be non-economically reductionist to believe that it is not everything doesn't root just to economics. It is to be economically reductionist is to believe that all we have to do is solve the economic problem and all the other problems will go away. And that is not what I believe. I heard some leftists say that unions uphold capitalism. I disagree with that. I think that unions are something that are meant to operate within capitalism. There's really no need for a union in a world where the workers own the means of production. But I don't think that you can just say across the board unions, uphold capitalism. I don't think that that's true. I think some of them do, though. Some of them end up becoming collaborationist. What's my opinion on left comms? It depends on the left comm. I used to think that left comm was a more coherent grouping, like they agreed on more than they did. It kind of includes a lot of different tendencies. I would say if they're a council communist, well, you should probably just spend the time necessary to convey to them that you and them pretty much have the same politics. I think that a lot of council communists think that their politics are way different from anarchism, and when it's actually explained in depth, it's pretty easy to demonstrate how council communism is basically anarcho-communism. Ismavolt says, a union in anarcho-syndicalism is a revolutionary workers' collective. It serves to organize the workforce during the overthrow of capitalism, and then afterwards it serves to organize production. Yeah, it has to undergo a transformation in that process, I think is one of the key understandings, however. It becomes a revolutionary workers' collective in the revolutionary transition, right? In the capitalist world, it remains a union. After transformation, unions are unneeded. And as you say, it's a workers' collective. And really, even during the transition, it can be a workers' collective. However, that is certainly not a universal. I think that is definitely something that is true in anarcho-syndicalism, or at least in the theory of anarcho-syndicalism, though. Excuse me. My God, I have so much drainage. You said, I do think class reductionism makes more sense than intersectionality, at least in practice. I don't really agree at all. In fact, I think that class reductionism has failed pretty miserably. In fact, the reason why I'm an intersectionalist is because class reductionism has been such a failure in practice. It essentially leaves behind people whose revolutionary concerns are just not class-based concerns. It's good for organizing people together under a common interest, but it is not actually good at revolutionary organizing, because if all you try to do is get everybody to only be concerned about economics, you are going to be leaving behind a bunch of people for whom many of their primary concerns are just not economic concerns. You're going to be leaving behind people for which racism is the thing which oppresses them enormously, or patriarchy. You know, if all you do is just focus around class and you tell them those concerns will be resolved later, you're lying to them, because we can see in practice that after revolution, those concerns are not immediately addressed. Those concerns still linger because they were not dealt with in the revolutionary process to begin with. My opinion on the KPAM, I haven't been able to find a good source to read more about it, to be honest. So if you've got a good source on the Korean People's Association of Manchuria, that'd be great. Brandon says, hasn't the liberal use failed and empowered the right in America? No, liberals aren't really using intersectionality. You cannot be intersectional and ignore class issues. So liberals don't use intersectionality. They have weaponized identity politics, which is very different. No, I'm not sick. I just have so much drainage today. I'm it sucks. Not enjoying it very much. Yeah, liberals cannot be intersectional. They ignore class, and ignoring class means that you're not being intersectional. Intersectionalism is about analyzing all of the overlaps of the different forms of oppression. How do you find good sources for literally anything? I guess it depends on the thing. Yes, I would say that the term intersectionality is misused by liberals. My God. So let's see here. Echo Water says, I'd be interested in you talking about the Symbiosis Federation if it's discussion worthy. You mentioned it the other day, and I couldn't find much on it. Admittedly, I didn't look very hard. It is not very active at the moment. It is supposed to be a grouping of social ecologist and communalist organizations, but the Federation itself is not very active these days. Samuel Tremblay says, what do you think about Richard Wolff's strategy? Insofar as his strategy is building lots of worker cooperatives, I think that's a good thing. I think worker cooperatives are vastly underappreciated by the left. My God. Make it end. Okay. Let's see. Okay, like this. Sit. Like that. Okay, whatever. I am currently reading this book by Clara Mate. And she talks about the rise of fascism in Italy. And she talks about what was happening beforehand and how the workers were organizing beforehand. And And the workers, a lot of the radical stuff they were doing was forming workers' cooperatives. And despite what a lot of leftists like to say, that workers' cooperatives are not a threat to capitalism, they are just a capitalist instrument. Well, I'll tell you, the Italian fascists did not agree. The Italian establishment during the rise of the workers' movement was very, very threatened by the rise of the workers' cooperatives movement. The workers' cooperative movement was seen as a direct negation of the principles of capitalism. And the truth is the more that I've studied over the years, the more I've realized that this belief that workers' cooperatives aren't like revolutionary, or that they don't have some important part of, in the revolutionary picture, this is very modern. And this is not shared by most of the oldest historic leftists. In fact, even Marx himself says that workers' cooperatives are very valuable in that they are a demonstration of the workers' ability to manage themselves, and demonstration that it is not necessary to have rulers over the workers making decisions in order to run the economy. It's very unusual to me that that somehow in the modern era we've convinced ourselves that an economic formation, which is all about the workers owning the means of production, is not revolutionary somehow. I'm more and more skeptical of that day by day. This is not to say, of course, that a workers' cooperative all by itself is revolutionary. It has to have a revolutionary thrust to it, of course. And we would want these to be federated together such that they can, collectively exert power on the economy, but also reduce costs and things like that. But yeah, no, workers' cooperatives are extremely important, and the left has failed to utilize them to their own detriment. Thanks for the donation, Jessica, for $5. Jessica says, how can neighborhood councils, co-ops, communal organizations collaborate with rank and file unions? I think that they have to make the attempt to do so. I mean, obviously you can reach out and attend events that are hosted by the union, but also, I mean, if somebody's looking for a job, have them look for a job in one of the unions you're trying to, work with. Try to join that workplace and try to use those connections you have to the union to maybe hopefully help you get hired a little bit. Wow. I'm going to have to, Yeah, no, I think also our organizations should be trying to help form unions in workplaces, especially if we have a lot of people that are in those neighborhood councils or, in our organizations. We should be trying to unionize our workplace with those members who have a large populace within a specific workplace. I think that's a good way to go. But yeah, I think that's the key, is like actually attempting to do outreach. Unions host events, and we should be attending those events and getting to know the people that are the movers and shakers in that union. Yeah, I think that's really the key. It's just like purposeful integration rather than just hoping it will kind of happen, Let's see here. Zal says, I agree that they have a part to play, but I believe that class struggle is seriously undervalued in the modern era. See, I see workers' cooperatives as a component in class struggle. I see plenty advocating for cooperatives and mutual aid, but very little union advocates. Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. I think that modern leftists have overcorrected on the topic of the union. You know, there was a period of time where economic reductionists only wanted to talk about unions. And so there was a correction against only wanting to talk about unions because it was seen as being, I don't know. It really wasn't even that like people started talking shit about unions. It's just that they de-emphasized them so much that now they basically don't talk about them at all. But forming unions is just as important as it's ever been. Nothing has changed. The union hasn't become unimportant somehow. The union is still integrally important. This is despite all kinds of concerns and pitfalls that they may involve. Like, somebody says, what about the Oakley Makes Games says, what about the criticisms of unions serving as a release valve and a pacifying influence on revolutionary sentiment? The thing is that every piece of progress can serve as a release valve. So I don't really think that is necessarily a very good criticism, because insofar as that we are trying to win, we are going to have gains. And insofar as we're going to have gains, those could act as a release valve where certain people are going to be like, I got what I wanted. I'm good. And insofar as people might settle for any given specific gain that takes place in the process, then all of that could possibly diminish revolutionary aspirations. I think my concern is that this position of holding that unions are release valves for revolutionary energy, it suggests that revolution only comes about when people are just miserable and they never succeed in having any gains. But that is a problem. Immiseration theory has not really held up super well in reality. We can see that people are miserable all over the place, but that doesn't mean that they're rising up to change conditions. So it's not just as simple as being like, if you succeed, then your movement diminishes, or if you fail, your movement grows. Like, that's not a good way to look at it, in my opinion. Instead, I think it is that you have to have like a cohesive revolutionary vision. You have to practice solidarity. Your people have to be aiming for something which the system cannot concede to them. Their demands should always be bigger than the system can concede. So if what you do is you get a reformist movement where their demands are always something the system can concede, then you are going to get, you are essentially going to have a movement that dead ends as soon as those demands are fulfilled. So you need revolutionary unions, not liberal unions. Liberal unions absolutely will eventually dead end. They will even co-opt all of the efforts, the union efforts. You have to have a revolutionary outlook on the creation of unions and what their purpose is in a broader revolutionary strategy. I think that if people want to go back into union building, which I think is a very appropriate strategy, they should definitely read the Anarcho-Syndicalists. Go read Rudolf Rocker's Anarcho-Syndicalism Theory and Practice. Zal says, co-ops are hard to establish. Sorry, it just reloaded. They're hard to establish because they cost a ton of money to start, and they must compete against capitalist enterprises. Yeah, that's absolutely true. Startup is one of the hardest parts for cooperatives, getting the funds, because then, of course, as soon as you get investors, the investors want returns, and then you can kind of become ingratiated to those investors. So you have to be clever about how you get startup capital. A bunch of the most successful cooperative movements I've seen have come about by workers in a company buying out the company as it's failing, pooling all of their money together, or taking out a big loan as a group of workers and just buying the company. That's been very successful in a variety of circumstances I've read about historically. There's also just the sense where you just start small, right? You just start with what you've got and you slowly build and build and build. But as far as like competing against capitalist enterprises, studies actually show that workers' cooperatives are more productive than corporations of similar size. So I don't think that one, I think that one is a little bit overblown in our spaces. We like to imagine, it's weird. There's a contradictory belief in our spaces. Like on one hand, we believe that socialist economics would be more efficient. And on the other hand, for some reason, we believe that corporations are more efficient. That these are, two contradictory notions. I think that in reality, what we see, and once again, this is what studies show, workers' cooperatives are more productive. I'll even show you the study. I mean, here's the Nation article. I've linked this to a lot of people. I'll just link this to y'all. Oh, that's funny. That's a good coincidence. Here we have NME 4534 saying horizontally organized political orders cannot craft economies of scale to fight against states. Anarchism is utopian. Perfect timing. I just debunked that with what I said about workers' cooperatives. Yeah, no, it's been like horizontally organized political orders are highly efficient. They require buy-in from the people. They also require proper delegation and structure. They certainly can't be loose. The looser they are, the more that they are going to fail to respond to pressures. Loose agglomerations of human beings have never responded well to well-structured pressure. So horizontalism has to be well-structured in response. But yeah, I mean, there's the example in the economic sense. Workers' cooperatives are more productive than corporations. Turkey and its mercenaries have absolutely decimated Rojava. That is not true. Yeah, you say hundreds of thousands of people don't have electricity and rely on humanitarian water services. Yeah, that's called being in a war. Like, that's just what happens in war. Things go bad. People die. Crucial services are disabled. Like, that's true in war. They're in war. It's funny. It's like, imagine being like, you know, you're at war with somebody and somebody from the outside is like, you had casualties. People died in this war. That means you failed. It's like, or perhaps there are all kinds of different strategic imperatives in a war. There are different things you have to protect. There are different signs of success and failure. And that Turkey has a strong military and has a lot of air support, and that has actually been one of the crucial things that has helped Turkey in that conflict is actually having an air force. And an air force is not something you can summon up in a day. It's not as easy as just saying you want an air force and then having an air force. Rojava is essentially struggling with a bunch of enemies on all sides, and it is doing exceptionally well given those circumstances. I think that seeing it as a failure is ideologically motivated. I think that you want to see it as a failure because you desire evidence that horizontal methods cannot work. It should also be said that it is becoming less horizontal over time. If your argument is that right now they are failing, well, I hate to tell you, they are the most hierarchical they've ever been right now. So if your idea is that they need to be more hierarchical and that'll solve the problem, well, they're the most hierarchical they've ever been. Why are they failing worse than they've ever failed? It's a contrapositive to your claim. So that doesn't really make sense. So let's see here. Somebody up above. Where was it? So Jessica says, we've started a co-op styled after Co-op Tulsa. We called it Co-op Seed Pod. But I just want to be clear that Cooperation Tulsa is not a cooperative. Cooperation Tulsa is a political organization. We desire to create cooperatives, but at the moment we are not a cooperative. You know, a cooperative would be a worker-owned organization, which pays out wages and seeks to, you know, derive profit on the market and everything. That's not Cooperation Tulsa. We don't have like we kind of have worker ownership, and that everybody who's in the organization owns the land together, but people are not being paid out a wage. We're not making enough money off of what we're doing at Cooperation Tulsa for that. Right now, we're trying to develop the means production at Flat Rock, and then eventually we might be able to form a workers' cooperative from that. Just to be clear. Kristen Supine says, I'm studying fascism right alongside you to write extensively about it. And I wanted to ask why you claim that fascism seeks to return to monarchy or monarchical rulership specifically. I mean, I'm just looking at the trends of power, the power structure. You know, like a lot of people get really distracted by what a power structure claims about itself, by its propaganda about itself, by its aesthetics. And I think that this is being sort of distracted. I think that in practice, when we look at a power structure, we should be asking ourselves, what are its actual internal relations of power? And that's how we should understand what it is. And if we look at fascism, it just is the desire to return to a monarchic style of society. You know, you have this extreme concentration of power at the top. You essentially have this single figure seeking to be seen as the one valid ruler. They try to almost always use forms of religious justification in order to give people the idea that they have some divine right to rule. I mean, look at Trump. It is all over MAGA, this idea that he's like chosen by God. And when you look at fascism in practice, it is essentially against modern science. It seeks to return to religious orderings of society. It just desires to recreate the foundations of monarchism. I mean, look at even the quote unquote Maha movement is trying to degrade our reliance on modern medical science. It's trying to get people to believe all kinds of backwards ideas about how science works and what disease comes from. And those are all trying to base it upon individual responsibility rather than a recognition of how the biology works. They don't want to base things in their foundations in science. They want to base their foundations in a spiritual worldview that, the cosmos of power is essentially that the ruler of the system is at the top, and the only thing above that ruler is God. So, it's just very much like monarchy. Really, the only major difference insofar as we're talking about the end game vision of fascism and monarchy, is that monarchy existed with I guess you might call it a feudal economic system. Whereas in this society, it's very difficult to reproduce a feudal economic system because capitalism is so powerful. However, I got to say, even on that specific account, we are in a time where the capitalists have become so powerful and they've absorbed so much wealth that they are now actually starting to kind of reproduce feudal conditions where we are all living sort of this rentier relationship, or rather they are rentier extractors, and we have to live almost as serfs by comparison to them. So I wouldn't say we've fully reproduced feudal economic relations, but we're even moving towards the reproduction of feudal economic relations. So fascism, in my mind, is a sort of neo-monarchism, and that's why, if you look in practice as well, the fascists are never opposite of the monarchists. The fascists are always on the side of the monarchists, and the monarchists are always on the side of the fascists, with very few exceptions. And I'm thinking of like Great Britain, basically. And even then in Great Britain, you had like a lot of their political figures who were like pro-Hitler until World War II. Monarchists are big fans of fascism. Fascists are big fans of monarchists. They're always all mixed together, and that is not a coincidence. They desire very similar things for society. We have a fucking unironic monarchist in here. That's wild. That's wild. The idea that monarchism is more stable than fascism only comes from looking at the best case scenarios. When a system is practiced for thousands of years, you're bound to have a few like fluke sort of outlier examples where they lasted a long time. But in reality, monarchy was highly unstable. Like, it had a constant crises of the transfer of power. These are one of the key criticisms of liberalism, of monarchy, is that it was so bad at transferring power. It had constant conflict. When power would be transferred, there would be often bloody conflicts. Entire national boundaries would be redrawn. The peasants would suffer enormously as their lands were raided and destroyed. Lords would defect. You'd have lords going to other nations and joining other nations. It was very unstable. It was only stable in a few key examples. And in those key examples, it was stable. But in most examples, it was not. Monarchy is not a stable system. It's a system, well, I mean, it's stable in the sense that the powerful remain powerful, but it's not stable insofar as that it maintains a long-term political order. In fact, what we see is that if it's stable for too long, that is to say it maintains power for too long, you end up just getting massive inbreeding and incompetence, and nepotism essentially becomes rampant and destroys the system. And this is why you've had essentially, since ancient Greece, writing about the damages of hierarchical power and the dangers of monarchy. And the more absolute the monarchy, the worse, because the more absolute the monarchy, the more likely they are to put into place sycophants that just agree with them and do everything that they ask. And then you end up degrading your system. So you don't actually value expertise, and your quote unquote elite then end up being people that really don't have any elite capabilities. They just are there because they have been born into a lordly family. And there is nothing qualifying about being born into a lordly family. So monarchy is generally highly incompetent, filled with incompetent people throughout, also filled with deeply corrupt people most of the time, and as a result, often also filled with a great deal of cruelty, and maintains its order through the use of cruelty to a large degree, as well as brainwashing. That's why religious conceptions of the world were so popular among almost every monarchy. Monarchies are not highly stable. The reason why that fascism appears to be less stable than monarchy is because monarchy is just not the right system for the current era. Once capitalism has advanced as it has, monarchy is just not really viable anymore. Monarchy became obsolete once capitalism developed, because then all your locus of power has essentially been disseminated out into the economy. And then you do not have this absolute locus of central control as you did in monarchy, where the largest amount of power was usually still in the king, at least when compared to any individual lord. And so that was only viable insofar as the monarch actually was the most powerful figure, or at least that everybody was willing to serve him as the most powerful figure. As capitalism progresses, you end up in a situation where the king just simply is not the most powerful figure. The monarch is not the controller of the economy, and that's why in this transition period between monarchy and capitalism, you have mercantilism, because mercantilism is essentially capitalism serving at the behest of the throne. So this is essentially monarchy, I guess you might say monarchy coping with the change of the economy. The capitalists are obviously becoming very powerful, and the monarch can no longer deny it. So instead, he has to enter into coalition with the insurgent capitalist class. So once the capitalist class becomes powerful enough, well, the monarch just becomes kind of superfluous. Now what you need is a system which can broker all of the power relations between all of the various capitalists, all of these heads of industry, and the masses of people. And this is why parliaments came up in the late medieval period. You started to see all of these forms of parliamentary governance, which were attempting to broker all of these needs, the needs between the capitalists, the masses of peasants and just normal people, and the lords themselves. And you start to see that they develop separations within these houses of parliament, England being one example, which were attempting to balance the tensions between all of these different interests. And this is because the monarch was no longer a suitable you know, justification for power once it was clear that there actually just was power in other places. So why is fascism less stable in that sense, or, you know, like has less examples of stability than monarchy? Because monarchy only worked within a specific economic paradigm, which is gone now. So the fascist attempt to return to monarchic relations, of course, is going to be unstable. It's attempting to recreate something that can't work. The old monarchic order can no longer work. It's not possible to have monarchy in the modern world. So as the fascist, you are essentially set out on a self-destructive project. You cannot return to old feudal economic relations. It's really not possible to fully return to them as they were. And you cannot return to a system where the monarch has ultimate power, because capitalism has dispersed that power into a variety of different heads of industry and owners and, you know, shareholders of various kinds. So fascism is unstable because it is attempting something which is against the way that reality works and is contrary to the economic interests of society as it's currently organized. So yeah, that's my thoughts on that. Who are some of my favorite non-anarchist philosophers? Well, I was going to say Camus, but Camus was considered himself an anarcho-syndicalist, I think. I really like Hume. Hume is one of my favorites for sure. I was going to say Deleuze, but I don't know. Deleuze almost seems like he's an honorary anarchist or something. Let me think. I like the Stoics. I at least I think there's a lot of wisdom in the Stoics. I would not consider them anarchists. I'm trying to think, like, who would be those, like, sort of key figures. Yeah, I mean, I keep thinking of philosophers who are anarchist adjacent. I mean, I like Marx. Marx is pretty fucking sweet. There's a lot of good stuff in Marx. I don't know why, when I'm put on the spot, I always have a hard time answering this question. And then afterwards, I'm like, oh, I should have said blah, blah, blah. And I should have said blah, blah, blah. I always have trouble with that for some reason. Infinite Love says, oh, okay, you clarify up above. Man, I'm not a fan of monarchy. Okay, that's good to hear. Infinite Love says monarchy was very traditionalist. Fascism was more modernist. I actually disagree with that. I think that one of the key pillars of fascism is anti-modernism. I think that this is another example of how fascism desires to return to monarchy. Damn, somebody says monarchy is literally just nepotism as an ideology. It basically is, yeah. Wow, I wasn't even looking at the chat while I was giving that long ramble on monarchy and fascism. But yeah, lots of good points in the chat here in the meantime. Yeah, good stuff. Jessica S. says, you have some critiques of dialectical materialism, right? What do you think of Bookchin's dialectical naturalism? One of my main critiques of dialectics is that it is vague. It is amorphous. It is very difficult to actually pull out a real method out of dialectics. And every time I try to press somebody about giving me a method, they give me a very different answer as per what dialectics is. And if they give me a similar answer, it's often a really, like, almost useless sort of thing to say. Like, they're like, you know, dialectics is the conflict, or sorry, they won't use the word conflict. That'd be the right word to use. The contradiction between varying principles or principles in opposition to one another. And I'm like, okay, that's not that's not like unique to dialectics. So what is like dialectics actually have to say about this that's somehow useful? Like, give me an understanding of its method so that how would I even apply it? and they struggle. They almost all struggle. It's extremely vague. It seems like all it really is a way for them to analyze the interplay of things. So they say, oh, there's this element and that element. They have differing needs, differing desires, differing foundational principles, etc. That means that they enter into conflict. Their conflict is a process wherein their principles are either synthesized or mutually destroyed. And the result is something that is either the affirmation of one, the affirmation of the other, or the mutual destruction of both, or a synthesis of the two. And to me, that is just incredibly vague. I don't know what I'm supposed to get out of that that's so useful. I think that people would be so much better informed just studying how the real universe works, understanding how science works, study physics, study chemistry, study cosmology, study systems science, study chaos theory. That will give you an understanding of how the universe actually works. Dialectics is sort of a vague philosophical methodology. I think even calling it a methodology is a little bit generous. It is essentially just a bunch of justifications for thinkers reasoning however they please about the interplay of complex systems. And I find that not very useful, to be honest. And in fact, I think that it leads people to saying things which are patently absurd. For example, Hegel and Bookchin alike rejecting the law of non-contradiction. Like, that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. And their reasoning as for why you can reject the law of non-contradiction demonstrates the shallowness of their understanding of how logic works. They say, like, here's the example that's often given. They'll say, yeah, the law of non-contradiction obviously isn't true because, me as an adult, it's me, and the baby me is also me, but I am not the baby, right? Like, it's developmental. Me is a developmental process. So then I can't be me now and baby me at the same time. So A doesn't equal A. I consider this one of the most idiotic arguments I've ever heard in philosophy. This is so poorly considered and so shallow of a point that it demonstrates to me they didn't think about this topic almost at all. Like, they didn't really think about it at all. Literally, all I have to say in response to that is, yeah, you're not a baby. That's your insight? Like, yeah, baby you, that was you at a different time. Time is part of the process. You are not this you when you were a baby. You are not the you when you were an embryo. You are not the you that was just a combination of particles that later would be repurposed into an embryo. That's because time exists. What? This is just idiotic. Like, you would need to instead, you want to demonstrate to me the law of non-contradiction doesn't exist? I need you to show me that when I was a baby, I was also an adult. That would be the law of non-contradiction being demonstrated not true. And you go, well, that's absurd. I can't show that. Yeah, exactly. You can't show that because the law of non-contradiction is true. In fact, I would say that one of the things, as I study the universe and try to understand how the universe works, the thing that seems to be at the foundation of all of existence, the foundational law of existence, is the law of non-contradiction. Nowhere has a contradiction in reality ever been found. In fact, I would go further and say that a contradiction does not exist in reality. That a contradiction is a statement of a thing that not only does not exist, but cannot exist. And so this idea that you have an entire ideology, you have an entire quote unquote method that's based around trying to imagine that quote unquote contradictions exist, bankrupt from the beginning. There might be useful things within there. I like that it's a process ontology. I like that it thinks about things as processes. I like that it thinks about things as having conflicts and resolutions. Great. It just doesn't offer really anything useful in my mind about how to understand how those processes continue or how those processes are resolved in practice. That's just It's just not useful in my mind. I think that maybe what might be useful for some people is just kind of watching people reason through processes, things in relation, conflicts between differing parts. That's all like useful. But I think you would be much better informed just learning logic in a philosophy class, or really just learn science. Learn how the universe works. Don't start in the abstract with something called quote unquote dialectics, which you seek to apply to the universe. Go learn how science has determined the universe does work. Go learn how the universe does work. Then take what you've learned about how the universe works and then go and see if the philosophers have properly understood it. I think what will happen after you learn how the universe actually works is you will learn that dialectics is not very useful. It's just not a very good way of understanding the way the universe actually works. In fact, once again, if the idea at the center of dialectics is that contradictions are continually being played out and resolved, that is just false. That's not how the universe works. There is no contradiction anywhere in the entire universe. Contradictions are misunderstandings by human brains. When we find a contradiction, it's because our human brains were not powerful enough to understand the world, and we built principles that were incomplete somehow. So yeah, that's not useful. And then what I say is, okay, so cool. Let's talk about, let's say that like by contradiction, you don't mean contradiction, you mean conflict. Cool. Okay. So now we can talk about conflict, and conflict is like something that's worth considering, right? But like, then why don't you just go about understanding how transformation takes place between systems with conflictual foundations? Go learn how chemistry works. Go learn how chaos theory works. Go learn about system science. If I were to tell you to understand the universe, the last thing I would do is tell you to go learn dialectics. As for Bookchin, I find it interesting. I find his approach interesting, but the example of the baby and the adult, that was the most annoyed I've ever been with Bookchin. When I was hearing him say that, I was like, wow, this is some of the stupidest shit I've ever heard you write. And that's impressive. He said some really stupid shit at times, like insofar as I'm talking about him being a Zionist, or maybe at least, if not a Zionist, at least supporting of Zionism. But that his attempt to justify Hegel is, I just find it tiring. I think that if you're desiring to move away from Marx, you might as well just go to science. I don't understand. Why are so many leftists so averse to just learning how the world actually works? Why are so many people calling themselves materialists and they're still stuck on idealist philosophy from the 1800s? It's like, what the hell are you talking about? What is this? You're not a materialist if you're using an idealist philosophy in order to reason about the world. You can't quote unquote flip it on its head when your philosophy isn't based in materialism to begin with. If you want a materialist philosophy, learn science. Sai says, Bookchin would say that the relationship between the baby and an adult is a continuum. Sure. Yeah. I mean, you know, everything is developmental. That's true. I'd say our inability to define species demonstrates the value of dialectical thinking. We actually can define species. In fact, species is a scientific delineation. And the delineation of speciation is the ability of two species to breed and create productive offspring. I mean, that's pretty much what it boils down to. And you'll notice that as species begin to diverge, they stop producing productive offspring. You start getting sterile out, children like mules and so on. Like, this is just something we see in nature. It's about genetic compatibility. That's what a species is defined as. The Darwinist is here saying stupid ANCAP shit. It's so funny. I think one of the funniest things about ANCAPs is they have all these arguments, but they never did any study to actually understand how anybody else's thoughts work. That's the thing that always blows my mind. It's like ANCAP arguments against anarchism are just unanimously demonstrations of their own ignorance. And I don't understand how can you live your life not knowing how anything works? Like, how can anybody like tolerate being an ANCAP? You have to essentially be purposely ignorant of how everything works. And I just don't understand, how do you live your life that way? Like, if you're going to criticize anarchism, why don't you try to learn what anarchism actually says? Like, clearly it shouldn't be intimidating to you. Like, why don't you just try? Go actually read anarchist texts, because I don't know, the shit you're saying up here, it just demonstrates your ignorance. And that's why ANCAPs don't convince anarchists. Like, there's no pipeline from anarchism to ANCAP ideas. And that's because once you've learned what anarchism is, anarcho-capitalism just clearly is not persuasive. The arguments that anarcho-capitalists have against anarchists are all straw men and based in the ignorance of anarcho-capitalists. But like, how do you live that way? Like, how do you actually live not knowing how anything works? Like, isn't it frustrating when everything in the universe doesn't work how you think it will? That's what seems annoying to me. You know, like, so much of my life has been, I want to be right about how the universe works. And so I've gone about trying to study how the universe works. And if I find that something about my predictions is wrong, if something about my framework doesn't make sense when I compare it to the universe, I question my framework. But it's like, ANCAPs, I don't understand how you can live being wrong all the time. How do you live when everything you predict is always wrong? Like, I just couldn't imagine tolerating that on a daily basis. And I don't know how you live like that, but it explains how y'all live in like this fantasy world, essentially. Like, you live off in fantasy land about what you think will happen. And you have to, because you can't live in the real world. If you lived in the real world, you would have to confront the real world, and your ideas would just completely crumble. So you have to live in this like fantasy land of what you think maybe things could be like. And it's funny because then every single time that your ideas are actually put in place, what you think will happen doesn't happen. Instead, catastrophes happen. And instead of going, man, maybe my ideas, my foundational ideas were incorrect. No, that never happens. Instead, y'all just go back to the fantasy. And that's mind blowing. I mean, damn, you even got Millet? Oh, Millet. Yeah. Oh, I mean, everything you predict is wrong. Like, everything. So you could instead maybe give me one thing that was correct. That would probably work. Because like, Austrian economics is probably the most debunked conception of the world ever devised. It literally just does not work. Look at all of Argentina. It is pure refutation of Austrian economics. It is a demonstration that your deregulationist conception of how capitalism works is just complete falsehood. And here we are, that Argentina needs to be bailed out now. They used your politics. They used your economics. Your economics were used in Argentina. And look what we got. We got Millet being bailed out by the American government. What's that about? How do you explain that? What's going on? I thought that your politics, your economics would work if we just tried them. Here we go. We're trying them. Here we tried. What's happening now? You used your wonderful anarcho-capitalist economics, and now the United States has to bail you out for $20 billion because you're so incompetent and your economy is crashing and your government is insolvent. Oh man, wow, incredible. What an incredible economic ideology you've got here. Only maybe the most unanimously failed economic ideology in the history of humanity. And he crashed it so fast too. Holy shit. He came into the Argentina economy, which was already really bad. And the only thing that could make an economy worse than it already is to do what ANCAPs think you should do with an economy. Deregulating an economy is the fastest way to destroy your economy, because capitalism encourages these sort of rentier parasite relations where the capitalists just get more and more powerful, And then they essentially just extract everything out of the people. And then you don't have buyers. So you have low velocity of the dollar. And then that means that you just have a poor economy, a flagging economy. So you constantly end up having insolvent companies that go bankrupt because they don't have consumers, because they were so greedy that they destroyed their consumer base. And this just happens every single time you deregulate the economy. Now, ANCAPs, if they had any sense in their heads, they would look at that and they would be like, oh, well, it looks like capitalism doesn't do good at regulating itself. It looks like capitalism is actually, very irresponsible. But no, they don't think that. They say shit like this: that wasn't real anarcho-capitalism. Yeah, I mean, as somebody says, it's never real anarcho-capitalism because capitalism is a product of state intervention. Capitalism can't exist without the state. This is what the ANCAPs just do not understand. So here's the thing. He says, quote unquote, deregulation is bad. Somehow an anarchist who wants government regulation. Yes, insofar as your parasitic system continues to exist, there has to be balances on it. Okay, like, we don't just want a system where psychopaths get to destroy all of society because of this extreme desire for their own empowerment at everyone else's expense. You want a system where there's essentially no reins on how extractors can exploit other people. You essentially want, you are like the equivalent of, during the time of monarchy, just wanting a completely unregulated slave economy. That's essentially what you want in our context. And so we're over here being like, no, there should probably be some regulations on how this all works. If y'all are going to keep keeping slaves, then maybe you shouldn't be able to beat them, and maybe you should have to feed them, and so on and so on. And so it's like, yeah, insofar as capitalism exists, it must be regulated. Otherwise, we just recreate this sort of feudal warring states period. Like, this is just absolutely absurd, and it's not going to work, and it doesn't work. There's no demonstrations of it working. In fact, the only time that power structures ever utilize an anarcho-capitalist framework is when they are trying to create extensive distress so that they can do shock doctrine. It's so destabilizing. An anarcho-capitalist approach is so destabilizing. It's a weapon against foreign adversaries. You literally go to foreign countries and you do what anarcho-capitalists think should be done, and that is so destructive, it destabilizes the entire society, making it easier for you to come in and seize and co-opt it. That is fucking devastating. Like, holy shit, your ideology is so ineffective. Your ideology, your economic conception is so ineffective that doing it is a weapon against the stability of a nation. I'm just blown away by that. And then you're over here being like, yeah, well, I'm sure it can work. We just have to get the state out of it. We just need less checks on our system of rampant exploitation and selfishness. Crazy. Y'all are insane. I don't even understand how you can believe this kind of ridiculous stuff. It's made for people that live in a fantasy world. It really is. It cannot exist in the real world. That's why, real anarcho-capitalism has not existed. Yeah, because anarcho-capitalism can't exist. That's not real. Hey, baby. It can't exist. There is no such thing as anarcho-capitalism. Anarcho-capitalism is a weapon to destabilize nations, and that's all it is. Little kitty was just down there meowing. He down there meowing. He likes this, though. Yeah, if ANCAPs became mutualists, at least they would be like somewhat living in reality. Then at least there would be some demonstration that they understand how things function. It's so funny because just a few months ago, all the ANCAPs were trying to rub Milei's Argentinian victory in everybody else's faces, being like, yeah, see, we're winning so good. And then just a few months later, it all fell apart. How long has he even been in power? Okay, Milei, when was Milei elected? Let's find out. Let's see here. 2021, bro crashed the entire economy, destroyed what was already a very, very challenged economy in only just a few years. Oh no, not 2021. Let's see here. He was elected in 2023. So November of 2023, just a little over a year. Took him just a little over a year to destroy Argentina such that it couldn't even be bailed out by its internal processes. It couldn't even fix itself, you understand? Okay, because that's normal. In capitalism, the capitalists get deregulated, they destroy their economy, then the state has to bail them out. That's normal. This is just the eternal cycle of capitalism. But Milei fucked up his nation so bad. He fucked up his nation so bad that they couldn't even bail out their own economy. They had to go run to the United States to fix their problems. And that is another level of you fucked up your society. Only ANCAPs could manage that kind of miserable fuck up. Truly impressive. Incredibly impressive. But no, it's always funny seeing them come in. They're like, oh man, I'm going to score a dunk on this one. And then it's just like everybody trashing them and they have no response to any of it. All they have is straw men. And honestly, all any ANCAP needs to do, just read some fucking theory. Really just go read the history of how any of these things function. If you want to criticize anarchism, probably you should learn what anarchism actually is. Yeah, no, it's hilarious. I mean, ANCAPs would be laughable if they weren't so destructive. They end up in positions of power and then they just destroy everything. They just destabilize economies. That's the only purpose of ANCAPs in society. They are a wrecking ball to stable societies. That's all they are. And they don't ever put anything in place that is a good replacement because their ideology isn't based in reality, isn't based in how anything functions. So they can't create anything that would actually be functional afterwards. They end up in a situation where they always have to run back to the state in order to bail out their miserably failed experiments. Every single time without fail. Argentina did it faster and more intensely than most other ANCAPs would want to do when they had that kind of power. And as a result, they fucked it up so bad, they couldn't even bail themselves out. They had to run to a foreign country to get bailed out. That is deeply incompetent and is a clear demonstration of the inviability of ANCAP ideas. The Darwinist is like, I don't care if you people trash me. I don't respect your opinions. I don't think you're intelligent. Darwin would not have supported anarcho-capitalism, just so we're clear. You should probably call yourself the Spencerist. I don't think you'd probably know anything about what Darwin actually believed. Capitalism does not mean bailing out businesses. No, it does. It does because that's the only way capitalism can work. Capitalism is a fundamentally unstable system. It has to have state intervention. That's the only way it can exist. It came into existence by state intervention with the state, enclosing enormous pieces of land, which had previously been in the commons. So it had to deprive people of the ability to exist off of common ownership. And then after that, it was propped up by state intervention, having enormous cash infusions, doing protectionist trade policies to help the corporations get started in those nations. Capitalism is fundamentally intertwined with the state. There is no such thing as capitalism without the state. That doesn't exist. It's not real. No, I'm not going to kick him. He can stick around. Yeet said, hey, Anark, what would you say are your most conservative beliefs? I don't know if I would qualify some of these as conservative, but they are ideas that often conservatives say more often. And that is that I think that people should practice more self-responsibility. That's something I've heard conservatives say for my whole life, is that, people shouldn't just blame everything on external sources. They should essentially focus on what they can do to change their circumstances. And I'm not saying, of course, that I deny what the left says, which is that not everybody can just snap their finger and change their circumstances. And I certainly don't believe that you can, quote unquote, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. But I do think that people should have an internal locus of control, that they should recognize that the only thing they control is themselves, and that they should do as much as they conceivably can to improve their conditions, to improve themselves, eternally improve themselves, to make themselves capable of confronting their circumstances. That having an external locus of control, looking for external sources to fix your problems, is probably not going to work out so hot. You're going to live a life where you probably won't get a whole lot done, and you're probably going to live a very resentful life, and you're not going to feel very empowered. Once again, this doesn't mean that I have a simplistic view of this, that means everybody can just pull themselves up by their bootstraps. But I do think a lot of people's lives would probably be better if they did take some responsibility for their own actions and take responsibility for where they are in life and try their very best, at least, to make the best of their circumstances. And I recognize there are plenty of people for which no amount of effort's ever going to bail them out of the shit situation they've got, whether that is a situation of their health, in which case that one's really hard to overcome, or a financial situation. Those are very difficult hurdles to overcome. But I do think people should take a personal mindset that you should overcome hurdles as you approach them. Even if they seem insurmountable, you should always immediately think how you can overcome those hurdles. I think that's the one that I share with right-wingers the most, or the one that I hear them talk about the most, that I actually agree with. It's also the reason why I like Stoicism. I have my criticisms, but I like Stoicism. Let's see here. Conservatives always talk about how they like guns. Love guns. Guns, I think we need guns. I think that that's important. So I think that the state should keep their fucking hands off of our guns. But to be fair, that used to be a leftist belief, right? There's that old Marx quote. Let's see here. Let me find it. Marx, surrender guns. What is it? See if I can find it quickly. Yeah, under no pretext should arms and ammunition be surrendered. Any attempt to disarm the workers must be frustrated by force if necessary. So, it's not necessarily a conservative belief. These days, it's mostly conservatives who defend guns, but obviously most of us on the left agree that we should defend our right to own firearms. Yeah. So, yeah, I think that's the answer. Those are the only ones that really come to mind. I think self-responsibility is an important thing. Back when they were bolt-action rifles, I don't think that Marx would say the workers should be disarmed because they had better guns. Marx was saying the workers should not be disarmed because he knew guns were going to be necessary to carry out revolution. I don't think that he would think, oh, we shouldn't have guns. Now our guns are too good. He would be just like, yeah, our guns are better. That means we can do revolution better. No, we should not let those be taken away. I don't think he'd be like, oh, we got good guns now, so definitely we don't need guns anymore for revolution. I don't think that really adds up there. But yeah, so somebody said, could you talk about liberation theology? I think liberation theology is good if it works. I've actually been trying to research lately what leads to liberation theology catching on. And, I was actually asking some people, who are key thinkers in liberation theology? So far, I haven't really been given any, key thinkers that are uniting people in a liberation theology perspective. It seems to me that liberation theology comes about most often from churches which preach a more libertarian or a liberatory gospel. And that makes it really hard to even figure out how we would utilize liberation theology. I guess what it would require existing radical Christians to become like preachers and stuff. That would probably be the best way for it to happen. But no, as far as I'm concerned, we need to collaborate with people who are liberation theologists. I think that, and I say that as someone who doesn't believe in anything supernatural in the universe. I even think that religion is mostly harmful in society, but that doesn't matter. Insofar as somebody wants the same things as me, they have the same praxis as me, then I'm going to collaborate pluralistically with those people. And, liberation theology has demonstrated quite a capability in carrying out revolutionary activity. So liberation says, why do you think the right hated the new Superman movie? To me, it's like blatantly obvious. The right is so morally rotted. They have so little like ethical foundations that when they see a Superman that does have ethical foundations, it disgusts them. They are so wicked and selfish and greedy and hateful that a Superman that is actually like the foundations of Superman looks like an insult to them. When they see somebody who is morally upright, who is brave, and who cares about the lives of other living things and is self-sacrificial, they see something which is condemning them because they have none of those qualities. They are cowards. They do not care about the lives of other people. They are not self-sacrificial. They are selfish. That Superman is clearly to them a political message because he is a refutation of all of their values. They hate the presence of any sort of story beat which emphasizes empathy, human goodness, caring about other people. These are all deeply anti-right-wing values. And they recognize that. They become so fascistic that Superman is their enemy. They are more like Lex Luthor. They are more like Baravia. They see themselves in Lex Luthor. They see themselves in Baravia. They see this sort of seething hatred and alienation and xenophobia. This is the foundation of their ideology. So when they watch a Superman movie where he really just fights the traditional villains of society, which is to say the greedy, the power hungry, the hateful, the xenophobic, they view themselves in the villain's role, not in Superman. They see Superman as a threat to them, and the perpetuation of a Superman that values things like goodness, kindness, empathy is a threat to their ideology and a threat to their political program. It's funny because people keep mentioning Baravia, right? Baravia in the movie, they keep being like, oh, this is Israel. This is Israel. A lot of people don't know Baravia as a story beat in the Superman comics precedes the existence of Israel. Baravia was in the comics and it was created before the existence of Israel. So when people look at Baravia and they see similarities to Israel, that's them telling on Israel. And actually, I remember one of the things I said right after I saw the movie, what I said to the person I watched it with was like, everybody keeps comparing Baravia to Israel, but I got to be honest. I mean, Baravia isn't like Israel. They didn't just kill all the children instantly when they were marching in. They didn't just bomb everybody indiscriminately. Like they actually put troops on the ground and they spared the children. Like they're clearly not Israel. Israel's way more evil than Baravia in the Superman movie. But yeah, this is why this all is a challenge to them. This is why they hate the new Superman movie. Infinite Love says, wasn't Superman always kind anyway? Yeah, well, Superman always was kind, and then we got the Snyderverse, and he wanted to create a more morally gray Superman. And I'm not saying that's not okay. Like, that's okay. But I think it gave people a really weird understanding of Superman. Like, Superman was supposed to be like the eternal Boy Scout. He's like true good, capital T, capital G, true good. Like, that's who Superman's supposed to be. So got a $5 donation from Eric Gray. Eric says, in regard to liberation theology, James Cone is known as the father of black liberation theology and has written several books. Okay, that's interesting. James Cone. Let's see. James Cone. Well, you should recommend me a book to start with. Tell me which one do you think might be a good one for me to learn from. Because I'm completely open to reading about that. Kate Chalia says, what is your opinion about the widespreadness of mass shootings if you simultaneously believe in the right to possess firearms? What is the synthesis here? I don't believe that mass shootings are just happening because of the ownership of firearms. Sweden has one of the highest gun ownership rates on the face of the planet, and they are not carrying out mass shootings all the time. The reason mass shootings are happening is not because we just own a lot of guns. The reason mass shootings are happening is because of social determinations. That is to say, people are poor, people are stressed, people feel hopeless. The United States is an incredibly hopeless place to live. It is a dark and depressing and depraved society. And it essentially trickles down into all of our social aspects. You know, the sort of nihilistic attitude comes from people feeling hopeless about the future of the world and feeling as if, well, I would have committed suicide anyway, but instead of that, I'm just going to kill a bunch of people, then kill myself. You know, at least I'll make a name for myself. At least I'll make a splash in the pond before I die kind of thing. That is the actual root of the mass shootings. The actual root of the mass shootings is fascistic ideology slowly weaving its way into society. The root of the mass shootings is a people who have no feeling of hope or meaning or a conception of the future. Everything is getting worse. The world is burning. The economy is already crashed and we have to live within it. There are no jobs. People feel alienated and lonely. People are depressed. That is where the mass shootings come from. That's why Sweden has roughly equal, last time I looked at it, I think, ownership of firearms, and yet there aren't mass shootings in Sweden, and there are enormous numbers of mass shootings in the United States. Mass shootings are motivated by hopelessness as well as political radicalization, desires, and also on the right wing, mass shootings are useful because right-wing ideology is based in fear. Okay, so they want fear and deprivation. The more fear and deprivation there is, the better that right-wing politics function. Right-wing politics essentially function if everybody is selfish and doesn't care about anybody else. And so what they want then is atomization, and atomization is very easily achieved through fear. Okay, so if you're afraid of everyone else, then you start only looking out for yourself, and you don't look out for anyone else. And then that benefits right-wingers. So it's useful for right-wingers to carry out mass shootings. Mass shootings make people afraid of being in communal spaces. They make people afraid of their neighbor. They make people afraid of people who just own a gun. It creates atomization, it creates alienation, it creates separation between people, and that's helpful for right-wingers. So right-wingers are essentially, they have carte blanche, just carry out as many mass shootings as they want, and it can never backfire on them. Even if they are suppressed, that won't matter because they already created the distrust, the loneliness, the alienation in society through the mass shooting. The mass shooting, the massacre itself, it enables right-wing politics. They're in a feedback loop with one another. Prod Arcsign says, hey, Anark, how do you cope with the feeling like your fellow countrymen, I assume is what that's supposed to say, are downright evil? I've been hearing people wanting Rhodesia back. Well, I would want to remind you that the internet is really exposing you to the worst of humanity. If you talk to the average person, they're not going to talk like these fucking chuds on Twitter. Okay? I'm not saying they're not around you. They are. They are. There's lots of bad people out there. But I think if you go out into the world and kind of just start meeting normal people, not people on the internet, you're going to find that most people are not like this. Most people, if you were to ask them what Rhodesia is, they wouldn't even know what Rhodesia is. Okay. So I think it's really useful to get out into the world and talk with people, even though that seems like the last thing you want to do, because as you said, you might feel as if you're afraid of your fellow countrymen. You should still do so, because I think what you're going to find is that this this group of sort of fascists, even though it seems like it's like 50, 60, 70%, is more like 10 or 20%. And that you should probably just keep your distance from people that make you feel unsafe, but you should not assume that everybody in society is a fascist just because fascists are very vocal online. I think that, you know, like I was just saying, insofar as that the right wing is essentially an ideology based on fear of other human beings, and it benefits from fear and the perpetuation of fear, you are fighting against that system by not being afraid of your fellow countrymen, by going out there and just talking to people and trusting that human beings are human beings. And maybe they have some fucked up opinions, but most of them are not the sort that are trying to create a white ethno-state. And it seems like they are when you use the internet as your sample, but when you get out into the real world, you'll find that that is just not as common as you think it is. People think all kinds of stupid things, but they are generally not out and out white supremacists. The Darwinist talking about Charlie Kirk. Oh my God. This dude's such a fucking meme generator. All he does is just spout talking points he's heard in his echo chambers. So the Darwinist, you say the right has 100% justification to be afraid when you filthy fucking commies are murdering us in public. What about Charlie Kirk? What about the Oklahoma City bombing? You ever heard of the Oklahoma City bombing? Cool, let's talk about that. The Oklahoma City bombing, it took place in 1995. Well before anybody was like out there in mass identifying as communists. You know, Timothy McVeigh, he killed a mass number of people. He essentially damaged like 300 nearby buildings in the process. He killed 168 people. 19 of them were children, and several hundred more people were injured in the process. He did this as a right-wing extremist. You know, it's weird to me. You're so concerned about Charlie Kirk. Why aren't you concerned about Timothy McVeigh? Where's you don't care about the children that died? You care about a fucking right-wing propagandist? One right-winger gets killed by a left-winger, and that's your whole world now. That's everything. Well, I'm sorry to tell you, right-wingers have been doing this shit for decades now. And in fact, right-wingers brought us to these conditions to begin with. You know, we have our Timothy McVeighs, but he wasn't the only people. We had this going on for a while. You ever heard of Anders Breivik? Anders Behring Breivik. Yeah, you know, it's so weird. This guy did this well before we had our modern resurgence of out and out communists. How weird. How weird. You know, this guy in Norway, he went on to an island where, you know, like essentially a youth camp was having a meeting, the workers' youth camp. And he shot 69 people, and 33 of the people he killed were children. He just massacred a bunch of them. Man, it's so weird. Yeah, I mean, like, you're right. Wow, we should definitely be afraid of the leftists. That's the people we should be so afraid of. Incredible. I mean, it's super weird, you know, like, we have to be afraid of the one example of a right-winger getting killed, but we don't need to be afraid of the hundreds, thousands of examples of right-wingers going on mass shooting sprees and blowing up buildings and killing dozens of children. It just demonstrates to me that you don't really give a shit about this. So stop pretending like you care. You don't. Why pretend? Who are you pretending for? You don't give a shit. The only reason you care is because for the first time in a long time, a right-winger was the target of political violence. But when left-wingers are the target of political violence, you have no problem with it. Even if they're fucking children, you don't care. You don't care. Just don't lie. This is a political goal to be scored with you. You don't actually give a shit about that. And nobody gives a shit about Charlie Kirk. Okay, it's Charlie Kirk. He'll be forgotten in a few months. What a piece of shit he was. There's no way that anybody is going to make him out to be a good person afterwards. It's just not going to happen. Yeah, as fucking Brandon says, the same day that Charlie Kirk was killed, a white supremacist shot up a school. Okay, let's compare the two things here. Okay, we have Charlie Kirk, a dude who spent his entire life spreading hatred and alienation between human beings. Okay, all he ever did, his whole life, was devoted to the escalation of political tensions and violence between human beings. That was his whole entire purpose in life. Okay, dude gets shot for it. Not a shocker. I mean, the perfect period on the end of his story. And then the same day, a white supremacist goes on a killing spree in a school and kills children. And you give your emphasis is on Charlie Kirk? Like we need to be afraid because Charlie Kirk died, and you don't give a shit about the fact that children were being killed at the exact same time by a right-wing mass shooter? Don't try to fucking moralize. Don't try to moralize. You are the villains of society. Right-wingers are the villains of human society. The right-wing ideology is an anti-human ideology. It is an ideology which is only predicated upon separating people against one another. It is about splitting people apart. It is about destroying coalitions and creating unity under authoritarianism. That's what the ideology is all about. Okay, it wants to scare us about one another so that we all bow before some dictatorial figure. Because when I'm afraid of one another, I need a mediator. I need a strong man to mediate all of these fearful interactions. That's what you all want. That's what your ideology is, just a psyop. Right-wing ideology is a psyop to split human beings against one another, to make us afraid of one another, to escalate political violence, to escalate political tensions, to make us complicit in the needs and desires of the ruling class. That is all that it's for. Right-wing ideology is not organic to the people. It is organic to the ruling class. And if you are not one of the rulers, if you are not the shareholder of a massive corporation, if you are not a congressperson, then right-wing ideology, if you believe in right-wing ideology, you are being cuckolded by your superiors. You're being cuckolded by the power structures. You are essentially advocating the ideology that weakens you. You are advocating an ideology that prevents you from having solidarity with your fellow people in your class, which is 99.9% of humanity. The people who do not make all of their income off of ownership, but instead have to labor for a wage to live. Those are the people that you're actually in coalition with organically. But if you are an average person who believes in right-wing ideology, you believe in ideology that is built to destroy you. You are literally advocating for your own destruction, your own impoverishment. You are never going to be benefited by right-wing ideology. It is literally built to oppress you. And if you believe in it, you have been duped by a psyop. You're a class traitor. Yeah, as people have said, you're a class traitor. That's all it boils down to. The Darwinist. This is one of the first reasonable responses you've had this whole time. Pretty much everything else you've said has been a bullshit straw man. You said, communists killed farmers, right? They killed millions of farmers. This is the thing. I disavow these people that you're discussing. I disavow authoritarian leftism. And you would know that. I'm sure you do know that. Like, it's not as if you've sat in on numerous ones on of these streams. And I assume you're at least familiar with the fact that I've made plenty of videos criticizing authoritarian leftists. That is not my method, and that's not what I believe in. So why do you even bring that up? Do you think that I advocate that, even though I spend all this time telling people I don't advocate that? I'm like known as one of the people who's most anti-tanky, as you might say. Like, I'm anti-authoritarian on the left as well. Why are you even bringing that up? Why are you bringing that up? Do you think I support that? I don't. That's one of my main criticisms of them. You think I'm, yeah, like somebody says, you think I'm Hakeem or something? Like, I'm not going to do apologia for authoritarian leftist regimes. I'm one of their biggest fucking critics on the left. Like, why do you even bring that up? It's just it just demonstrates. I mean, don't get me wrong. This is a valid criticism. I agree with this criticism. But why do you bring it up to me? Like, what's the point? Like, you didn't even think through the criticism. What's the idea there? I don't get it. The Darwinist says, if you think there are two types of communism, why do you think there's only one type of capitalism? You want me to be open-minded when you aren't. I would believe there were two types of capitalism if I saw that there were two types of capitalism. Okay? There's two types of communism in practice. It's demonstrable, right? I can show you the examples, the CNTFAI in Spain. I can show you a form of libertarian communism with the Zapatistas or with the KPAM or with a variety of examples. There's actual examples of this happening. The system actually existed and it worked. It failed at certain things, but it worked. There is no example of anarcho-capitalism. Capitalism always necessitates a state. Capitalism is a system where class conflict is rife throughout society. It creates divisions and conflicts among the people. Therefore, it has to mediate those conflicts through violence. When you have a system that is built on creating conflicts and inequality, you have to mediate that through violence. Therefore, capitalism necessitates the state. It can't be otherwise. It always will. If it doesn't have the state, it will create a state in order to stabilize itself. Whereas we have demonstration that you don't need a state in order for anarchism to function, in order for a libertarian communism to function. We saw it in Catalonia. It happened. It worked. The only reason that it failed was because of external pressures. It didn't fail because of an internal need to create the state. Whereas every example of anarcho-capitalism, it created the state to solve its internal problems. There's a reason for that. So the Darwinists, you say, this is a reasonable response here as well. Okay, I don't know what I said that made you start being reasonable, but you're at least making reasonable points. Okay, you said there is no example of ANCAP, but you could say that about any new invention the day before it's invented. I agree with that. But the thing is that even theoretically, what you're proposing shouldn't work. Like, there's no good reason why it should work. Every single thing about capitalism is built to make your ideology not work. Okay, the only way you don't need a state is if you have a society that is going to follow a common compact where there is agreement about how society should function and where the people themselves can make those decisions. In an ANCAP society, you're going to have enormous inequalities between the people who own everything and make all of their money simply from ownership and the people who have to labor in exchange for a wage. That is an inherent conflict. They have differing desires. Okay, say what you will about Marx. You don't have to like or dislike Marx, but you cannot deny the fundamental principle he's introducing here, which is that the owners of capital have the interest of paying the workers as little as possible while extracting as much labor from them as possible. By contrast, the workers have the interest of working as little as possible while being paid as much as possible. This is undeniable. This is a fact. Okay? And insofar as that is the case, then there will always be conflict between these groups of people. Even if that conflict hits low points and high points, and even if it fluctuates, that is inherent conflict in society. And what you're going to find is without a state, that the masses of people who labor to make society actually function are not going to be okay with a small group of fucking robber barons owning all of the assets in society while doing fucking nothing. That is never gonna work. There's no reason why that should work. You have to be so idealistic. You have to be so delusional to believe that could ever function in a long-term sense. It's always going to erupt in tensions and conflict and probably outright war. Anarcho-capitalism, even if it were to be put in place fully as some of you intend, okay, it wouldn't last, because over time, the workers are going to eventually organize together, and they're just going to seize the means of production. Because here's the thing I think y'all do not understand. The thing that prevents capitalism from being overthrown today by the workers is the state. The state is capitalism's protector. This is the absurdity. This is the idiocy of anarcho-capitalism. Without the state, y'all have no way to defend yourself from class organization. And I say you, but you're not going to be the owner. You're not going to be the person who owns a massive corporation, but you're going to be a laborer. You understand? If you got your ANCAP utopia, you would live in a fucking wretched company town, getting paid in company scrip, okay? And you would never be able to get out of the company town. You would be an indentured laborer, essentially. And if you were unable to work, then they would just criminalize your homelessness, and they would kick you out in the fucking wilderness so that you could starve to death and die, or they would make you a fucking slave in their company town. Okay? This is the reality of the system that you want. There's no way that's ever going to last without there being revolts. Like, you need the state. You need it. And if you didn't have it, your rulers, the capitalists, they would recreate it. There's nothing to stop them. Nothing to stop them. You know, you talk about how everybody's going to abide by the NAP. Like, how fucking naive is that? Do you really believe that the people with all of the power are just going to abide by some fucking social compact without any repercussions? There's no repercussions if they don't. They're just going to recreate the state apparatus to defend their ill-gotten gains. And you are going to have to live in a society where the capitalists got even more of a head start on accumulating all of the assets of society than they got on this one, which is fucking devastating. Devastating. Why? It's you want your own subjugation. And that's just baffling to me. Baffling that you want your own subjugation. Why do you not want freedom? Why do you not want self-determination? I just don't get it. Like, I know you're so afraid of collaborating with other people. You're so afraid of a democratic process. You're terrified of it. Why are you so terrified of your fellow citizens? You're not terrified of the interests of a few greedy people who are going to accumulate all of the assets of society. How is that not infinitely more terrifying than having to collaborate with your fellow fucking people? Dumbfounding. Once again, anarcho-capitalism is a psyop. It's literally just there to distract y'all. That's all it's there for. There's nothing real about it. Your Lousy says they want the freedom to dominate. I think that is really what it boils down to. You know, if I were being charitable to ANCAPs, here's what I think they imagine. They imagine a society of a bunch of small, medium-sized businesses where a lot of people just make a business living off of their kind of personal labor with maybe like 1 or 2 employees. And there's no big companies, no massive corporations. They just like have this delusion that the market isn't going to allow that to happen. And they imagine, when they think of like freedom, they're imagining like their freedom to go like homestead or whatever, like their freedom from paying taxes, their freedom from regulations and permits and all of that. The thing is that that delusion, that world, that, you know, idealistic view of the world, there's no reason to believe that that would actually perpetuate. That would actually, number one, that it would exist. Because think about it. Okay, we live right now, as it is, with massive corporations. They've got billions of dollars, trillions of dollars of value, okay? These corporations exist and they're absolutely going to be a part of the process of transition. Amazon's not going away. Okay. If there's some transition to an anarcho-capitalist future, Amazon's not going anywhere. Amazon is going to be like a feudal city-state afterwards. They're going to own you and all of those laborers, and they're going to end up becoming a central part of the logistical processes of this future ANCAP society. Things aren't just going to start from scratch magically because you want an ANCAP society, okay? These massive corporations are going to continue existing through the transition, and they are going to become the new lordly dominators in the process. And your fantasy of a bunch of people with small businesses making do is not real. It's not real. It's not going to happen. It's not any more possible in that after that transition than it is right now. Because right now, those massive corporations have all the power, and during the transition, they're going to get more power. More power. They're going to privatize. They're going to get mercenary police forces to defend all of their assets, because in the absence of the state, they're going to need it. They're going to need it. Like, it's so naive. Incredibly naive. And this is the reason I say it's a psyop. It's a psyop because this is only valuable, holding this naive belief is only valuable to the heads of those massive corporations. They want people to engage in this like naive thought experiment, because this naive thought experiment gets people to be complicit in the transition to absolute power to the corporations. But there's no good reason why anybody but the heads of those massive corporations should believe that such a world would be good. It'd be good for them. They'd own everything. They'd be like the new states. Amazon would own massive swaths of land. Google would own massive swaths of land. You wouldn't own shit. You'd be a fucking miserable worker in a company town. That's the reality. Liberation says they already control so much of society. Imagine a world without any checks on them. Exactly. Infinite Love says, no, they want to be dominated. I think there's some sense in that might be true. I think that the people who want to be dominated, who like have kind of like concealed sub fetishes, those people are probably more often fascists. In fact, talk to women who are like doms, and they'll tell you that their main customer base are fascists. They're like conservative, right-wing, authoritarian men. Yeah, they absolutely do have like concealed sub fetishes for sure. Darwinist says, you know why I don't believe ANCOMs are a real thing? You can't really even start your idea that way. And not only are ANCOMs a real thing, we've actually done the things that we propose like that. You can't make the same argument in the opposite direction. You said, because when ANCAPs try to agree with you to end the state, you fight with us over it. You don't want to get rid of the state. That is not true. We understand that so long as capitalism exists, it's good to have antagonistic forces in opposition to other hierarchical forces. We want our enemies to fight our enemies. Okay? Insofar as capitalism continues to exist, the state needs to continue to exist, not only to enable capitalism, but also to regulate it so that we are not all absolutely deprived by the prejudices of the capitalists. The thing is that anarchism isn't just anti-statism. It is anti-hierarchical power. It's anti-domination. You want to just let one of the groups in this system of domination get to become the absolute dominator, the single dominator that rules over all. That is what y'all want. And why would we advocate that? That's absurd. Why would we want the state to stop existing under capitalism? That just means that now we'll be ruled by capitalists. Just in the same way, we wouldn't want capitalism to stop existing under the state. That would just lead to state capitalism. We don't want either of those. Anarchists are real anarchists. We want the abolition of all hierarchical power structures. Yeah, as somebody said, you want to replace the state with corporations. That isn't better. That isn't better. We don't want that. Why would we want that? We're actually in opposition to structures of domination. So why would we want capitalists to replace the state? It's absurd. Absurd. Long Defiant has been a member for 21 months. I appreciate you so much. That is awesome. He says, thanks for the good times. All power to all the people. That's exactly right. All power to all the people. Somebody in chat says cat, and then I have to go look for, oh yeah, there he is. Little Renzo in the back drinking the water. I don't think I missed it. Was it the one that was about liberation theology? Maybe I did. Let me see here. Oh, wait. Yeah, no, I did miss it. Eric. Eric gave $5. He said, The Cross and the Lynching Tree would be the first book from James Cone that I would recommend. Okay, cool. Give me just a sec. Cross and the Lynching Tree. Okay. Gotcha. All right. I have saved it. There we go. And back to live chat. Michael O says ANCAPs should basically be called Privarchists. It's a more fitting name. Yeah, I think that the best name is Propertarians. Propertarians. Hell's Bells says, Anark, do you have any good recommendations for resources on protest security and tactics? Yes, you should read the Black Flag Catalyst Guide to Revolution. Or the Revolt Guide. There we go. Okay, here is the link. There you go. Somebody said, thoughts on Jonas Sika? I think that's how it said, Sika. I like their channel. I don't necessarily agree with all their philosophical perspectives, but I like their channel. I watch all their videos when they come out. Some oh no says, any thoughts on attending a future Carolina anarchist book fair in North Carolina? I do not have the kind of money to be flying around, unfortunately. So somebody would have to pay for me to come out there. But Yeah, it sucks. Economy's not looking so hot. If I were increasing at the rate that I was before the economy had a downturn, maybe I'd be able to afford something like that. But unfortunately, not. Another recurring member here, Mike working for Green, member for 15 months. That's awesome. He says, "Do you think Firefly was just space colonialism?" I don't remember the details well enough. I remember that our main characters were like resisting. They were like resisting a space empire, kind of. Like, that's what I remember from it. So I'm really not sure. I don't remember all the details well enough. It's been so long. It's been over a decade for sure since I've watched the show. Universal Ron says, I was asking earlier about Nepal and what they can do to create horizontal systems right now. I mean, what they can do right now is they need to harvest that energy and turn it towards the creation of those systems, which requires active organization and social insertion. But that's easier said than done. You know, it's not one of those things you can snap your fingers and do, but there has to be a deliberate effort to do so, to create long-term institutions. One of the hardest things to do during a massive protest wave is to turn that protest wave towards something more practical, towards something more long-term, the creation of, like, you know, you might call them institutions or something. It's very difficult to aim people in that direction. However, that can be very, very durable if you can. I highly recommend that people in any large mass protest movement sort of situation start trying to create organizations and start trying to do building the revolutionary infrastructure rather than just meeting together with people, just planning more protests. Those are going to happen either way, but those of us who believe in the creation of horizontal power structures need to do the work during the mass uprisings to turn them into something more enduring. Achilles Run became benefactor. I appreciate you so much. A new member. I haven't seen a new member on the YouTube here for a little while, so I appreciate you becoming a new member, especially with the benefactor tier. So it's awesome. Just Trash says, in the what to wear section of the Revolt guide, I'm wondering what the elbow and knee guards are for. It's because you might fall down, like straight up. It's because you might fall down. Same reason why you wear them when you go skating, you know? The protests can be really sketchy. Like, things can go really bad. You should, like, that's what that's for. It's just to protect you when you fall. You're a benefactor ×2 on Patreon and YouTube. See, Achilles Run right here, providing the example for everyone to follow. Everyone should become a benefactor on every platform. Okay, I mean, I know y'all can't do that, but I appreciate those of you who do have the money to spare, helping me survive. The world is a tough place these days. They say, question, should I become an anarchist? Yes, absolutely. Asun says, what is the anarchist view on radicalizing the middle class or people who would be considered petite bourgeois? Well, I think that category is already really fuzzy. You know, who is in the middle class to begin with is kind of a difficult. First of all, what is meant by the middle class and what is meant by petite bourgeois are not an exact overlapping category. And what is meant by petite bourgeois is already kind of vague to begin with. Okay. So, like, the middle class could include a bunch of people who don't own anything, but just make decent money at their jobs, right? They just have a good paying job. And those people, I mean, like, you should just try to radicalize them. They work a job. They're wage laborers, you know? Yeah, okay, they're doing okay. But, like, that doesn't mean that they may not be allies. Like, I think that one thing is the left has made a big mistake of not allowing people the space to be class traders. If somebody is a class trader, you should encourage them forth. You shouldn't tell them, like, well, you have this and that, so, like, you can't be on our side. It's like, no, if they want to be class traders, let them be class traders. Let them funnel money into our movements. That's great. That's awesome. But also the middle class, if these are people that are just wage laborers, that's not even being a class trader. That's actually just them being class loyal. Them helping the movement is being class loyal. I would say a big part of it is about like helping them understand that they aren't petite bourgeois, that they aren't bourgeois, that they are proletariat. If they work in exchange, they labor in exchange for a wage, that is them being with the proletariat. They just have a better paying job than other proletariat, which usually just indicates that their job has more bargaining power. That is to say that there are fewer of them that do that job, or that it's very easy for them to move to a new employer, and so employers have to pay them more in order to keep them. And so if that's the case, I would say organizing, for example, like tech workers are a really good example. Tech workers generally are able to move from job to job. That means they're able to bargain quite a bit more. And in that occasion, then I would say trying to create guilds. We should be trying to create software developer guilds these days, because guilds transcend workplaces. They're just, for people that own their means of production and who can do their labor in a variety of places. Those people, we should be forming guilds. We should be creating software development guilds or programmer guilds. I think this is the sort of thing that needs to be done. You need to remind them of their class interests. They are not the owners of capital, that they are a wage laborer, just like the rest of the wage laborers. They're just in a better circumstance. Kachalia says, I have a couple questions I'll repeat. One, what is happening currently in Rojava, and is it doing well? I got to be deadly honest. I'm so tired of answering the question about Rojava. I'm just so burnt out because I've done every single stream I answer the question. I'm just so tired of repeating the same things. So I'm just going to skip that, all due respect. Number two, do you have a Discord channel? Yes, the Discord channel is available to anyone who becomes a patron or becomes a recurring member here on YouTube. If you want access to the Discord, either become a member here on YouTube by, I think, going down below. After you click subscribe, then you click again, and I don't remember what it says. You can become a paid member, in which case I will send you a link to the Discord. Or if you become a patron, all you have to do is enter your Discord information into the settings under Patreon. It will automatically integrate you. It will automatically invite you to the Discord. So you can just $2 a month if you just want access. And if you had enough to spare, you could give extra. Knowledge and Defense says, what about freelancers, co-op owners, and so on? Once again, as far as freelancers go, we should be trying to create guilds, because guilds are these things which are about a profession that transcend. I need to answer one of my donos here in a second, but they transcend a specific workplace. So we should be trying to create like developer guilds and stuff for freelancers. For co-op owners are already in cooperatives. Seems like they're already kind of there. Like all you have to do is help them understand how the cooperative is a vision of a better society. I'd say that's a key on that one. NLM says for $5, he donates $5. I appreciate you, bro. He says, what are your top 5 anarchist texts or books of all time? The most essential pieces of work. Oh, damn, you're really putting me on the spot. But I think I can name a few, at least off the top of my head. One of them is Nationalism and Culture by Rudolf Rocker. One of them is Anarchism and the Black Revolution by Lorenzo Camboa Irvin. One of them is probably Anarchy by Rico Malatesta. Then the other two, what would the other two be? I don't know. Those are the first ones that come to mind. Ecology of Freedom was actually really wonderful for me to read, but I don't know if everybody's going to get the same things out of it I did. I think probably more people would get something out of like Toward an Ecological Society by Bookchin. That would probably be an excellent one for everybody to read. My first bookchin was Ecology and Revolutionary Thought, and that was definitely very formative for me. I'm not sure what the fifth one would be. I'm actually not sure about these fourth and fifth slots. It doesn't immediately come to mind what these would be. I really like Anarchism and Workers' Self-Management in Revolutionary Spain, but I think people could probably read like the Anarchist Collectives by Sam Dolgoff. Or also there is one I think maybe called The Same Thing, like Anarchist Collectives by Bookchin, something like that. Bookchin also did one. What is Bookchin's called? It's like Bookchin, Anarchist Collectives. What is it called? It's called... I know it has like The Heroic Years as the secondary line. It's called The Spanish Anarchists, The Heroic Years. That's really badass. I think that's very radicalizing to read about the CNTFAI. Oh, yeah, there we go. A Social Anarchism and Organization. That one was also very, very formative for me and really more affirmative. You know, it was kind of just describing things that I already agreed with. And it did definitely educate me about a few more things, however. So Social Anarchism and Organization by Farge is another really great one. Question, should I become a Marxist-Leninist? No, I would not say you should become a Marxist-Leninist. I don't think that ideology has much to offer to the modern movement. Seeing Like a State. That's another good one. Seeing Like a State is phenomenal. I highly recommend everybody read Seeing Like a State. Knowledge and Defense says, yes, but what about the concern that co-ops can end up like Mondragon? I keep missing the donos. Donation from Victorious Gardenasaurus for $5. And they said, keep calm and plant something. And I'm loving that. That's absolutely the truth. Achilles Run donates another $5. And they said, what are some good struggle meals? I don't know. It depends on what your dietary needs are. But, you know, sandwiches are good. I would say eggs and bacon, but these days eggs are kind of expensive. But yeah. Not sure. Once again, it depends on your needs, but things that combine rice or ramen with other things, that is like that's a great combo right there. You know, you just get like ramen packets and then you just like put stuff in it. Hard to screw that up. Same thing with rice. Just get a rice cooker, clean your rice, make some good stuff. Let's see here. Knowledge and Defense. Knowledge and Defense says, what about the concern that co-ops can end up like Mondragon by reintroducing class when new employees join, outsource, encouraged to compete versus other co-ops, etc., eventually destroying and absorbing? Yeah, that's not good. I think the main thing to learn from Mondragon is that this separation between an employee and a contractor is actually like really important. Because if you start... if you create this conception that contractors essentially are not treated to the same standards as your employees, and then you start doing lots of contracting labor, you start hiring out a lot of contractors, and you can really degrade the foundations of the cooperative. And then you can create a smaller and smaller number of people who are considered workers within the cooperative. I personally think that this just means that you need to write a charter which somehow structurally disincentivizes this. So you need to have some limit on the number of contractors that can be used, or you need to track the number of hours that contractors do, and then you need to have some imperative that you have to offer them to be permanent employees within the cooperative, something like that. But yeah. Somebody asked, is Seeing Like a State an accessible book? Yeah, it is. I think that especially the beginning and the end are very like compelling. I think the middle of Seeing Like a State is a little bit slow, but Caleb Howard says, the lesson of Mondragon is also that cooperatives can't be divorced from radical social movements. There's a reason why Franco let Mondragon flourish. Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, absolutely. Thurna says, is there a good way to promote local self-sufficiency in a way that decouples these resources from needing exchange of currency, like trying to create a mutual aid ecosystem. Obviously, that's good if you can do it. But what I found is that that is incredibly challenging. And the big reason is this. The people who are doing the labor in order to like grow the food or whatever, when those people just donate those goods to a mutual aid organization, they are not then compensated in that process. So like we're in a society where if I want to buy things, I need money, right? But if what happens is I spend 20 hours a week growing food and then I just give that food away, I have essentially just given the food away for $0 and I have no compensation for 20 hours of my week every week. And that means that I can't buy food. So then I'm in this difficult situation. So I think that that's why workers' cooperatives actually are really important, because there does need to be compensation for labor within a capitalist system, because the compensation for labor in a decommodified system would be direct distribution of things that people need, right? So like I make the food for people, and then if I need transportation, somebody else provides transportation. If I need, childcare, somebody else provides childcare. We don't have that kind of robust system set up. So then it's this situation where I labor 20 hours a week and I'm essentially just charitably giving food away. And charity is cool and everything, but like mutual aid is essentially going to be like charity of everybody in every direction. So like that is really difficult to set up. And it is also, you essentially have to create a volunteer labor force until that network becomes robust. One thing you could do is you could set up a time bank, something we've considered at Cooperation Tulsa. But I also just want to suggest that while you're stuck in capitalism, people are just going to have to be compensated for things. And you should be trying to determine a mechanism by which people can be compensated for the labor they do. However, that's easier said than done. And in the meantime, obviously, providing people with services is good in lieu of being able to compensate them before you've got a workers' cooperative going. If you can create that ecosystem, that fucking rocks. I love that, and I'd be interested in learning from whatever you create. But this has been a key issue with just doing decommodified mutual aid networks in the current society. Knowledge and Defense says, what do you think about leftcoms defining capitalism as generalized commodity production, not just private ownership by the bourgeois employing proles, since money is still a form of capital? I don't think that this is an either or condition personally. I think that these are both like characteristics of capitalism. I think that trying to say it's one or the other is a bad way to go. It's just that we have a list of characteristics, and that as each of those characteristics are emphasized or de-emphasized, you have something that's more or less like capitalism. Okay, I got to use the restroom. Give me a minute. Somebody said cat sleepy. Is it did little Lorenzo make an appearance while I was gone? Oh, all right. Oh, by the way, I just want to mention anybody that's watching, if down below you want to create timestamps of clips you think would be good for me to clip out and turn into shorts, or even just like post on the channel, as like short videos or something, please do so. That's super helpful for me because, you know, it really reduces my labor. Like I'll be like, you know, I need a video. I just want to clip one out of a live stream, and I'll just go to the comments and I will just look and see what y'all tag in the comments. Like what timestamps you put in the comments ends up actually really helping me figure out what to clip. So y'all kind of have some ability to determine what gets clipped and put on the channel by what you put down there in the comments. So I just want to remind y'all that that's extremely helpful for me. Flinner says, do you ever think we'll see a third world war? Whew. Depends on how everything plays out. I think it's possible, unfortunately, but I don't know if it's what is going to happen. That is going to be highly determined by circumstance, unfortunately. A clip about the comments on the Superman movie? Yeah, I'll probably clip that one at some point. Knowledge and Defense says, apologies if this is in poor taste, but do you think Kirk deserved it? Maybe deserved worse even. You know, like deserved is like a hard word to use here, but he certainly brought it upon himself. He created the society that got him killed. No doubt about that. Like Charlie Kirk was deeply complicit in creating the society that got him killed. He was a truly terrible person that just created hatred and division and spread bigotry and shallow talking points for the rulers. And yeah, I mean, it makes perfect sense that he would die after having spent his life that way. I think that it's shocking more of them don't. Honestly, it's mind blowing. They spread this kind of hateful rhetoric all around society and never see the repercussions for it. Not at all shocking. Deservedness, I guess, is a hard question. You know, it's more like when you say deservedness, it's almost like we would hope that it happened. But the truth is that it's a rising political violence is not really beneficial for us in these circumstances, right? Like there's some aspect where it's like, oh yeah, we hope the people fight back. But there's another aspect where it's like, yeah, but also like if you go look at all of these circumstances where the people got into domestic shooting wars, like the years of lead or whatever, it didn't solve the problem, right? So like it's complicated. If it were the case that like we were escalating into like a full-scale civil conflict, yeah, well, that would make perfect sense, you know? But insofar as that we have to live in this domestic circumstance, it's kind of scary, you know? Like, truth is, I think most of us on the left were scared when we heard that. You know, at first we were like, whoa, I mean, finally a piece of shit got it instead, right? Like instead, finally somebody who was, you know, a truly terrible human being. It seems like maybe karma does exist. Like that's the way a lot of people felt, I'm thinking, but a lot of people also immediately probably felt a sense of dread knowing that there were going to be probably reprisals. That being said, it sure seems like more like what's happening is that people are already forgetting about it. The news cycle is already leaving it behind. He was just another piece of shit. He was just another piece of shit. That's the truth. He's just going to be forgotten. He was not an important person, and he was truly the worst that humanity has to offer. And so he's probably not going to be valorized for much longer than the fascists want him to be valorized. And they're already failing at it. And the reason is because they're really not good at memorializing their people. The fascists, I mean, the right-wing video in general, the right wing, sorry, I was reading chat and it got the right wing in general is so craven and selfish that it's hard for them to ever even be, sentimental long enough to care about the death of their own people. They are deeply cynical and self-interested. And so notice that all the talk about Charlie Kirk is already dying down. Yeah, he was a piece of shit. He doesn't deserve to be remembered. He deserves to be forgotten. Yeah, I mean, as numerous people have said, like, it's just like the repercussions of that are pretty scary, Like, I don't think any of us really want this back and forth thing. I don't think that's really what leads to a liberatory society. But, I mean, once again, he definitely brought it upon himself. Knowledge and Defense says, maybe not the absolute worst compared to someone like Fuentes. He was more subtle about it, at least. Yeah, I mean, but isn't that that's also bad in a way? He's also, he's more successful at spreading it because he's not saying what he actually means. So I don't know. Yeah, Knowledge and Defense says Trump in the same week was like, anyway, what about my ballroom or whatever? Exactly. Even Trump's like, I don't give a fuck about this dude. Moving on. Liberation says, usually videos like that don't get to me. Or I'll start by, they say, the up close video was insane. Usually videos like that don't get to me, but that one was shocking for some reason. I guess just because I've known of him for so long. Just shocking to see him killed like that in an instant. Actually, I actually agree. I do. That close-up video was very disturbing, and I've talked with numerous people, and they've agreed it was disturbing. Very radical left people all agree. That was a very disturbing video. That was basically a snuff film, y'all. We kind of like spread around a snuff film across society, and watched this person whose face we had seen on reels and videos all the time, be killed, and it really was very gruesome. He just died so fast. It was really brutal. But yeah, I think that's what it was. He was familiar to us. Whereas those children killed by a white supremacist in a school, or the dead children in the Oklahoma City bombing, or the dead children by Anders Behring Breivik, we don't know those kids. That's the sad truth of it. Charlie Kirk, people, we recognize him, right and left. And I think that made it sort of shocking for people. Whose very small face we've seen. Yeah. Gangsta Joe says, would you say the best way to interact with loud MLs on college campuses is to ignore them? I don't know. I can't really give a big overarching prescription on that. The truth is that, it really depends on the ML you're talking to, what they actually believe. It's really mind blowing to me how I talk to different MLs and they just believe so radically different things. I'll talk to an ML and I'll talk to them about what they think should be done and what sort of society should be created. And they end up just being a libertarian socialist. And then I'll talk to a different ML and it's like, oh, you're an authoritarian leftist. Like, you actually are a Leninist. Like, this makes sense. Your views fit Lenin's views. And then I'll talk to some other of them and they're like Nosballs and they aren't even aware that they're basically like right wingers, right? I would say take it on a case by case basis, but in a general sense, don't organize them with them in your political organizations. But you should treat them on an individual basis as human beings that might have all kinds of different viewpoints. Hypnosis about the Charlie Kirk thing says they also can't amp up their base to increase the violence because their rhetoric is already hella over the top. Yeah, it's like, how increase the violence? I mean, damn. Their violence is already so extreme. The right wing is already killing so many people. The right wing is already so violent, carrying out so many mass shootings, so many massacres. They're in power and they're victimizing people every single day with every agency that they're in. I mean, it's like, it's hard for them to ramp it up. They're going to have to put a lot of effort in to make it worse than they're already doing. Prod Arc Sign says, my friend thinks that the reason he was important to the ride is because he was supposed to be Trump's replacement. His 35th birthday would have been 2028. I find that very hard to believe. I don't think that Charlie Kirk was giving the presidential vibes. I don't think that he would have done as well as Trump. I don't think that he could have been a successor to Trump. I don't think that's really possible. Maybe it's possible, but I don't think it is. It's possible that they thought that was going to happen, but I don't think that would happen. Trump is a truly malevolent force. He is villainous. He's like as close as you get to demonic. He's a devilish figure. Hypnosis says, also, a lot of MLs are just baby organizers. They latch on to Marxist-Leninism because it's well-known compared to other tendencies. I agree with that 100%. In fact, this wave, I think those of us who are libertarian socialists and anarchists really need to be aware of that for this wave. The stuff that come out of the pro-Palestine protests, a lot of those people are calling themselves MLs because that was just a dominant tendency in the organizing for pro-Palestine stuff. But if you actually interrogate the beliefs, they really are not MLs. They don't really know enough to really call themselves that. That's just a popular tendency, and they took it on because it was suggested to them. It was more osmosis than it was some strong ideological commitment. So I think that people should be really careful in interacting with MLs that came from this last wave. Don't prejudge them too much, because it's hard to say how they came to that and how committed they really are to it. I say that in contrast to like the George Floyd stuff and the first BLM waves, because that was more anarchistic. So if they came to ML stuff, they're probably actually authoritarian leftists. But the pro-Palestine stuff just had so many kind of like vague and non-committal MLs that like a lot of them probably aren't even really MLs if you just give them a little while to talk. Yeah, I mean, as people have said, Illiterate says, locally, every ML I've encountered has been basically a libertarian socialist as well. Maybe some minor disagreements on tactics occasionally, but more focused on solidarity than ideology. Hypnosis says, in fact, many of them have very anarchic beliefs because Americans generally love the idea of a freedom. Also, if you explain a specifizo, especially, MLs are very weak to it. Yeah, no, agreed. I think that having them read Social Anarchism and Organization is probably an excellent transition point for many of these people who are MLs. I mean, mostly the ones that are MLs from the pro-Palestine stuff. I think that's where you get people that aren't quite as committed, and it's not clear exactly where their commitments arise from. So I would say you should approach them cautiously, but also charitably. Like give them space to explain themselves, and you might find that they're really not as much of an authoritarian leftist as they say. They're not really a Marxist-Leninist. They don't really believe those things. They believe it because of some really vague descriptions that have been given to them about what Marxist-Leninism is. So yeah, recommend to them Social Anarchism and Organization. Might be a really good transition point for them. Jessica says, what do you think of the term racial capitalism? Is chirarchy a better way to view these structures? Well, I'm not entirely familiar. I've heard this term used a lot, but I've never heard anybody really kind of like define it in depth. My understanding is racial capitalism is like capitalism where different racial subgroups try to get ahead by being capitalists. I don't know if that's maybe what's going on, or by racial capitalism, is it white supremacist capitalism? I'm not sure. So you'll have to maybe clarify, and then I can give my opinion. Liberation says, how does Ben Shapiro think he's on the right side when a shit ton of people with his same beliefs are literally Nazis who want him dead? Yeah, no, it's kind of bizarre, but when you look into the history of fascist coalition building, it's just so much more common than you might think that people of oppressed identities or identities that the right despises end up trying to bend the knee to fascist ascendancy. Ben Shapiro was already on the right. The truth is the fascism kind of bubbled up from beneath Ben Shapiro. Ben Shapiro wanted a racially, religiously ambiguous fascism. That's what he wanted. And then what bubbled up beneath him was like classical fascism, white supremacist, patriarchal capitalism, and anti-Semitic now. You see a lot of that. And I don't think he was really prepared for that. So he's basically on the right. He knows he's not going to do a left pivot. And so he's basically stuck among them. He doesn't really have much of an option, I think, is the thing for him. He's grifted so hard to the right that he's basically stuck in this coalition of fascist grifters. Yeah, as Knowledge and Defense points out, he's a lying grifter in it for the money. Same for Dave Rubin being gay, Candace Owens being black. I will say that Ben Shapiro gives me the vibes like he actually does believe this stuff. That's what I think. I think Dave Rubin, absolutely a grifter, completely opportunist. He doesn't believe anything. I don't think Dave Rubin believes anything. I think that he is completely self-interested. Candace Owens, it's hard to tell. I think that she might actually believe it. She seemed to be the only one who actually mourned when Charlie Kirk died. Everybody else was just like using it as a way to score points. Yeah, I mean, I think Ben Shapiro is honest. I think Ben Shapiro believes the things he says. I do. I think Dave Rubin is a complete grifter. I don't think he believes anything. He believes whatever is useful for him. Kachalia says, what is the size of anarchist and libertarian socialist organizations within the United States of America? Like, based on your knowledge, what would be their approximate size or influence? I'm curious. I don't actually feel like I have a good grasp on that. I mean, my estimations are completely like, I would say maybe tens of thousands, maybe, I guess it depends on how you define it. But if you define it more loosely, you might end up in the hundreds of thousands. But, you know, remember that the population of America is like, what, 150 million? Like population. Population of the U.S. is, wow, no, I was way off. It's 350 million. Okay. Yeah. No, I'm probably right. It's probably like maybe at most, maybe a few 100,000. I think if you include all the people who really just don't understand, but if you were to like look at their intuitions, they would be kind of like a constitutionally libertarian socialist. You probably end up in like the mid 100,000s. And if you were to look at all the people who have potential of being libertarian socialists, that would be millions. The people who I think that if you were to prod a little bit and kind of just do a little bit of shifting of their perspective, they could be a libertarian socialist. Yeah, I think that would be millions of people. But insofar as the people who are currently like avowed anarchists and libertarian socialists, you're probably looking at the tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands. The Gooberator says, hey, Anark, should we first worlders be more cautious of unionization given that it contributes to the global capital superstructure's exploitation of the global South? Absolutely not. That is anti-internationalist, because internationalism is predicated upon the proletariat of every single nation organizing for better benefits under the structure they have and to overthrow the structure of capitalism within their system. Internationalism is not foregoing better things within your nation. So out of like a sense of like contrition, like you're trying to tithe to the third world. That is this completely modern construct, has no connection to proletarian revolutionary struggle. Now, if we seized control of the system, obviously we should end the process of imperialism and exploitation. But the idea that we should just sit here and do nothing because we need to be guilty for being in the first world, because we're so sad about what has happened in the third world that we can't bargain for better workplace conditions, that we can't fight to have unions. This is absurd. This is a sort of self-flagellating perspective perspective that only like a bad empanada could actually spread. You know, this sort of self-loathing Westerner who would move to another nation and then pretend that he's the savior of that nation, that he's the good guy. This sort of self-flagellation is useless, and it does nothing to weaken the United States and therefore help people in the third world. The best thing you could do for people in the third world is, as a worker, bargain for the best conditions possible, because that weakens the capitalists of the first world. And in weakening the capitalists here in the United States, you weaken their ability to project power into the third world. The best thing you can do for the third world is not to just sit around and be exploited, hoping things are going to get better for people in the third world. It's absolutely a ridiculous perspective that only people who are completely detached from organizing can believe. Bad Empanada, just so everybody's clear, has no experience organizing, has no experience on the ground, has never done anything significant as an organizer, has never made a union, has never done anything significant in a political party. He is just a YouTuber. That's it. That's all he is. And he's just a fucking asshole, honestly. Like, he's kind of just a piece of shit. And that's why you really shouldn't be listening to him. You can listen to him if you want to learn factoids about events that took place. But if you want to learn about how to actually organize, how to carry out a revolutionary activity, if you want to learn about revolutionary history, he's a terrible resource. He doesn't know anything about any of those topics, and he has no experience on the ground by which to give you advice about those topics. So you can pretty much just discard anything he has to say about praxis. If you want to learn little like factoids about things that are happening, he's good at factoids. He writes like bachelor's level essays on things, but that's about it. Like, really just ignore anything he has to say about praxis. I consider him completely insufferable, completely unhinged. I trashed him once on Twitter and he had like a narcissistic meltdown. And now I've seen him having narcissistic meltdowns at other people on Twitter. He's just so fucking tiring. He's an annoying asshole, to be honest, with no idea how anything works on the ground. Yeah, somebody said he moved to Argentina specifically to benefit from the lower prices of the area. Yeah, exactly. He's no savior. He's out for his own self-interest. Notice he didn't move to Argentina and then join an organization. He moved to Argentina and was an annoying asshole on the internet. That's his legacy, basically. And it's getting worse. I mean, like, everybody's noticing that he's a fucking asshole and a piece of shit. Anybody who was paying really close attention already knew that, but now he's been exposing that more and more over time. Mohammed says, but most unions don't prioritize the third world, but only look out for their members' interests. Most labor unions threw the third world under the bus. Well, I mean, the truth is that a union's job is to negotiate for the rights of the workers. Okay, so the whole purpose of a union is to get better things for the workers in that place. The only way internationalism is meaningful is when those workers are powerful enough that they can project power internationally. But they're not going to be able to have power to project internationally or to coordinate internationally if they don't organize unions to begin with. Workers without unions don't have the power to change anything. And so, like, you know, the idea that you're going to tell workers, oh, the solution, the best thing you can do for the first world is to not organize and instead just be a completely captive, exploited population to the most powerful, you know, hegemonic empire on earth. Don't do anything to hurt it. You know, just sit around and be exploited by it. That's the best thing you can do for the third world. Idiocy. Complete lack of material analysis, complete lack of understanding of how organizing happens, complete lack of understanding of internationalism. Unions have to be powerful before they can be meaningfully internationalist. only once they have the power to exert power over their local economy and the global economy can they do anything that would even benefit third worlders, right? Like they don't have the power or leverage to get their corporations they work for to do anything until they have collective bargaining power. Then the strike, withholding of labor allows them to place pressure on those entities in order to actually be able to make any changes in the first world, therefore to actually put the hegemon under some form of duress or stress. Just mind-blowingly stupid opinion that, not your opinion, but just I'm kind of gathering where it comes from. The idea that people in the first world should not form unions. People in the first world absolutely should form horizontal power structures within the belly of the beast, and they should try to make them as powerful as conceivably possible as to threaten the ability of the hegemon to project world power. We should want to be drawing the attention of the hegemon inwards and trying to weaken the hegemon through the process of collective bargaining in mass, the creation of mass horizontal power structures and movements which can actually place the hegemon under stress. That will help people in the third world far more than sitting back and happily being exploited by the world hegemon. The Guberator says, I suppose the solution is more radical, prefigurative socialist unions than mainstream liberal unions, weakening their monopoly on the means of production and economic power. Agreed, 100%. It's quite possible that more liberal unions could absolutely lead to worse problems for the third world, because more liberal unions really don't give a shit about projecting the power that they gain through organization to help people in the third world, because liberal unions aren't internationalist. However, when you form more radical and prefigurative socialist unions, as you say, these actually have the capacity to be internationalist and to simultaneously bargain for their own wages while not trying to further exploit the third world. The idea that when workers bargain for better wages, that they are therefore bargaining for more of the exploitation of the third world is absurd, to be honest, because not all of the profits of this nation come directly from exploitation and extraction from the third world. This has been one of the sort of absurd claims of a lot of modern authoritarian leftists. Like they try to say that any place where, benefits have come to a nation and that nation does any exploitation of the third world, they try to present it like those nations' benefits come purely from the exploitation of the third world. So like if you bring up Sweden, Norway, Denmark, etc., people like to be like, yeah, but that's because they're colonialists and they're extracting from the third world. And then you're like, cool, give me information on that. Show me some data. They won't be able to show you any data because that's not true. Sweden, Norway, Denmark, those places are not doing well because of exploiting the third world. That benefits them 100%, and that's part of their process of extraction. But that's not why people in those places are doing well. They're doing well because they passed social democratic reforms. And if you were to cut out their exploitation of the third world completely, all those programs could continue to exist. Same thing is mostly true for the United States. The United States obviously is experiencing some economic downturn, but it's experiencing economic downturn regardless of its exploitation of the third world. A lot of what makes the United States so powerful is its domestic economy. It doesn't necessarily need that third world exploitation to maintain its position. The United States is fucking massive, y'all. It's huge. It's a very big nation, and it has an enormous diversity of different economic interests and industries within it, and populations with different skills. Sorry, I just heard something loud outside. It's just not the case that if workers do better in the United States, that means that they are directly just exploiting the third world. I think that's a ridiculous perspective. Don't get me wrong, some amount of it is obviously from third world exploitation. Not trying to deny that that's taking place. It absolutely is. And a lot of it is through imperial aggression, through the maintenance of the dollar, through imperial aggression. that stuff definitely does lead to the United States being in a better economic position because, when your money, when your currency is the world reserve currency, I think that makes a big difference. When you have control of things like the IMF and all of these other, international investment firms and so on, that definitely leads to projection of the United States' power, which definitely stabilizes and benefits its economy. When you're going into the third world and sabotaging all possible competing economic blocks, that also leads to the benefit to the American economy. But if America were to cease all of those things, America would not somehow just like plummet into the economic conditions of those third world countries instantly. The United States has a massive domestic economy and has an enormous amount of money tied up in that domestic economy. The truth is the United States could probably still be the most powerful and economically advanced nation on earth without doing imperialism. They would just not get to continually project their power internationally. And yes, the economy would probably shrink in the process because we wouldn't be able to keep ourselves at the world reserve currency. We wouldn't be able to keep ourselves at the gatekeeper at every single, global supply chain. But our economy is so massive. And we have so much development of our economic infrastructure. Even if we were to just stop doing that all at once, we would still probably be in the top 3 most powerful nations on the face of the planet. So yeah. Vlad the Impaler says, so you disagree with third worldism? Yes. I think that it's true to say that places that are the most deprived are quite possibly the places where it's most likely you'll see revolution. But I do not think it's the case that people in the first world should sit around waiting for the third world to do a revolution, and that the first world should just flagellate themselves and be sad about how they're in the exploiter, the hegemonic nation, and just sitting over here being like, oh, third world please save us. It's like, this is just this sort of, I don't know, it's like the Christian sort of ethic of self-hatred taken into the leftist ideology. It doesn't have anything in my mind to do with actual proletarian internationalism, which believes that the proletarian of every nation should be collectively bargaining for the most that they can conceivably get out of their rulers. That is how revolution is done. Third worldism, I mean, there are variations of it. I think some of them are more reasonable than others, but this idea that we sit around and just wait for the third world to do the revolutions, and all we do is we sit back here going, you're right, I'm bad because I live in a first world nation, I'm bad because I live in the hegemon, like this sort of like weird self-guilting behavior where we're like, please save me, poor people. It's like, it's ridiculous. It's also wrong. Like, as people experience deeper immiseration, they don't necessarily become more revolutionary. Some of the most immiserated people here in the United States, they're not the most revolutionary. They're often so miserable. They're so far down at the bottom of the hierarchy. They're so dominated that they don't have time or energy or, to revolutionize the world. And that's true in a lot of third world nations as well. They're so beaten down, there's not a high likelihood that they're going to be the ones to carry out revolution. Now, don't get me wrong. I also think that when you have very little to lose, you might also end up being the ones to be willing to revolt, right? Because you're just kind of like, well, I got nothing left to lose. Fuck it. Like, I'm going all in. That can happen. If you look at Indonesia, you look at Nepal, those are really interesting examples. But I don't think that it is the case that the revolution has to take place in the third world. I do not think it's the case that first worlders need to sit around being guilty and not organizing, instead being like, the third worlders will save us. I think that's fetishization, to be honest. It's fetishizing the third world. It's fetishizing people who are poor. It's fetishizing people who have been pushed to the bottom. Not to say that they shouldn't be admired when they struggle. They should. They are our allies. As internationalists, we should be in solidarity with those people who struggle from the bottom everywhere on earth. But the idea that we do nothing in the meantime, or that we should feel guilty about every single thing that we collectively bargain, not only absurd, once again, it's the inheritance of this sort of Christian ethos of self-flagellation. It's a fetishization of the third world as having some greater inherent potential for revolution. And I believe that that is inherently anti-internationalist. That is not a form of proletarian internationalism. It's a deviation of the revolutionary ideology of the left. That's funny. That sped up the chat. People apparently people were inspired to discuss this. There's a huge flood of messages here. I'm trying to catch up. Let's see here. Johnny the Commie says, why do you criticize authoritarian leftists far more than you criticize liberals? If anything, liberals are more of a threat because they are more mainstream. That's not true. I don't. I think you've commented that on one of my videos too, and I think I've already responded to you and disagreed. That's not true. That indicates to me that you've probably watched a small subset of my videos, which are critiquing you, and you're an authoritarian leftist. So you think that I've spent a lot more time on that than I have on critiquing liberals. But if you had considered the entire body of my content, you would see that I am critiquing authoritarianism more generally all the time. And that when I critique authoritarianism, that includes liberals. Liberals are authoritarians. So I think that really more indicates that you haven't consumed all of my work. You've probably consumed a small subset of my work, which is criticizing you, and you've taken that to mean that that is the bulk of my work. Enemy says, enemy 4534 says, why do you not make relative distinctions between different states such as China? Yes, China is abusing Congo, but Xi Jinping seems like a well-intentioned man. Because I do not believe in the great man theory of history. I look at structures, and I'm concerned about how structures perpetuate themselves. I have a materialist analysis of power. That is to say, I believe that people act in accordance with the structures that surround them, and that people do not transcend those structures, and therefore the individual themselves, not really super important. And that, we can see them making certain key decisions, but that the structure is more definitive of the sorts of things that will take place in a structure on agglomeration than specific individuals. And that I am really not super interested in looking at better and worse forms of exploitation and asking myself which exploiter that I support. So when I look at China, I'm like, oh, China is another capitalist nation, so I'm not really going to be spending my time extolling the virtues of China relative to the United States. China is only better than the United States because of its surrounding material conditions. And as soon as China is the world hegemon, which may very well be happening in the next few decades, it will carry out all of the same things the United States has. It is it doesn't have any inherent virtue. It is doing what it must do in relation to the global system of power, and that is what determines its actual movement. And so I just don't see any reason why I should be making relative comparisons to China. China is also a capitalistic system, which means it is going to carry out the arc of capitalist development. It is also an authoritarian system. It's a hierarchical power structure. Therefore, it will also be carrying out the arc of hierarchical development. And that no system, no nation, no people, no person is uniquely immune to the development of these hierarchical power structures, to the development of capitalistic economic structures. And therefore, I'm just not super impressed with a capitalist nation being better than the United States. The United States is the worst nation on earth. It's the most powerful and destructive empire on the planet. And like being better than that is really not super impressive to me. So when I look at China, I just look at another capitalist nation. It's not really something worth noting other than that listing it in a list of capitalist nations. So here in just a few minutes, I'll probably be jumping off. I do have to leave in not too long. So yeah, if anybody's got kind of last thoughts. Long Nose Boy makes pretty much the point I was trying to make, maybe more succinctly. He says, the union argument never made sense to me. Unions and social democratic reforms, to some extent, weaken corporate power, which weakens their capacity for exploitation globally. Yes, that's exactly right. When you weaken corporations, you weaken their capability to go off and internationally exploit people. Like, the only reason that happens is because they're allowed to run rampant and they're supported by the state. If you get the state to diminish the power of corporations, or you, in the development of unions, diminish the power of corporations through collective bargaining, you're making it harder for them to go do that. It's harder for them to project power when they have to worry about the collective bargaining that's taking place within their corporation. John Sean says, to my knowledge, the founder of the worker co-op movement was Robert Owen, a business owner, not a Marxist. He was a socialist, however. Owen was very important. Marx and Engels directly cite Owen as being one of the most important socialists in the history of the movement, and as having been directly developmental to socialism as an ideology, and in spreading that ideology all over Great Britain and abroad. He was a business owner, but he was attempting to make a worker co-op, and Marx himself was very supportive of the worker co-op movement. So I don't really care if he was a Marxist. I care about if he was a socialist. Yeah. Just got a $20 donation from Steve McNally. He said, hey, Dan, just woke up in Australia. Are you moving to the first Friday of the month? Just so I can set an alarm. I got up last Friday. Yeah, I think so. I'd moved it away from that last year because we were Cooperation Tulsa was doing an event on the first Friday of every month, but I think I'm going to move it back to the first Friday of every month. Knowledge and Defense says, but don't you agree that reforms are counter-revolutionary and in the long run conserve the ruling class? I think there's a really delicate relationship there. The truth is that sometimes getting reforms can be revolutionary insofar as that it inspires the workers to continue fighting. When they have this sort of a recognition of the power of their collective organizing, they might and can sometimes be more invigorated to continue fighting. I think that reforms can fight against, they can do this sort of form of recuperation, as we've said, if you kind of get everything you asked for. So like if the workers are only fighting for a bunch of social democratic reforms, and then those social democratic reforms happen, that is very likely to kind of end the movement. However, if the workers are fighting for a revolutionary transformation of society and they just get a bunch of reforms, that won't be enough. Because they're not asking for just a bunch of reforms. They're asking for revolutionary transformation of society, and they will keep fighting even after they've got them. So I think it's really about goal setting to a large degree. But I do think, don't get me wrong, you can definitely demotivate a movement by using social democracy, by kind of like going all in on concessions. We're just like, yeah, we're going to give you all the things you want and more, right? So yeah, I think Zal said it right. Reforms are not counter-revolutionary. Reformism is counter-revolutionary. That is to say, asking for the system to concede to your demands, that's not counter-revolutionary. That's part and parcel to a revolutionary movement. And by contrast, a movement which only wants reforms, that's all it's asking for, that's counter-revolutionary. Because then when they give you your reforms, it's a dead end. Knowledge and defense, you nailed it. So you said, so it's best to have maximalist demands like a stateless, classless, and moneyless society. Exactly. You have to have demands that are beyond what they can give you. You have to have demands that if they were to give you that, it would just break the system. And you make those demands well beyond what the system can give you. And then they will give you the world, essentially. They'll give you everything they can give you. You just have to push and push and push and push and push. And then eventually they'll have given you everything they can. And if your movement was asking for goals that are beyond what they can give you, your movement will keep pushing, and that will be the final transformation of society. Or rather, that will be a revolutionary transformation of society. So yeah. Somebody said, I recommend you read people like Foucault, Derrida, Deleuze, and Baudrillard. I've read all of those, yo. I've read all of them. I haven't read everything by all of them, but I've read Foucault, I've read Derrida, I've read Deleuze and Guattari. I'm reading, in fact, I'm going to be citing Baudrillard in a following essay. I don't know what you're talking about. Let's see here. Ethan Darcy says, we want achievable demands also. I mean, you should be happy to achieve those demands, but you should not be asking for achievable demands. You should be demanding, you should have a maximalist and a minimalist program, but your maximalist program is what all your rhetoric should aim towards. Don't aim your rhetoric towards a minimalist program. Otherwise you won't get shit. Yeah. So I think it's about time to call this one to a close. Needed a little bit of time to get ready before I go to my appointment. Perspectiva. Why did you strawman them as anti-science in our exchange? I don't know what you're talking about insofar as anti-science. I think that, yes, they certainly did fight back against science. And I think that especially Foucault. But I gave you a long response, if I'm recalling what you're talking about. I gave you like paragraphs and paragraphs of response. You should just reread what I said, because everything I said was true. Thank you for everybody joining the live stream. I appreciate you all being here. Just a reminder, if you want to help me continue regularly publishing on the channel and doing live streams and putting up videos, that you should become a Patreon or patron at my Patreon, which is patreon.com/Anark. If you want to support me over on Means TV, you can put my affiliate code in when you subscribe to Means TV. Also remember that if you become a member, either here on YouTube or on Patreon, I would give you a link to the Discord. If you do it on Patreon, all you have to do is enter it in the settings, and then you'll get automatically invited to the Discord. If you have become a member here on YouTube, just send me a message somewhere. I'll give you a link to the Discord. But I think that is about it. All right. Well, thank everybody for coming to the stream, and I'll see y'all next time.